We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen. Clerk, do we have quorum? Clerk, we do have a quorum. So, first order.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of this House. Today, the 16th of November 2022, reports of the Auditor General for the year ended 30th of June 2021 on the financial statements of the Busia County Public Officers Revolving Fund, Sibo Water and Sanitation Company Limited, Kakamega County Assembly Loans and Mortgages Fund. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 6, notice of motion.
The Honorable Mwenda Gataya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I wish to give a notice of motion for the state of food security in Kenya. that are aware that Act 43 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 stipulates the rights of every person to be free from hunger, to have adequate food of acceptable quality, and to clean and safe water in adequate quantities. Further, aware that there is prevailing food shortage in Kenya, which is as a result of, among other factors, lack of and inadequate rainfall over the last two years, consistent decline in the number of farmers and lands committed to farming, and the Russia-Ukraine war that has led to an increased cost of fertilizer and fellow products which are critical farm inputs, suggesting 4.1 million Kenyans in the arid and semi-arid lands are sourced to an acute food shortage situation, and about 942,500 children under 5 years, 134,270 pregnant and lactating mothers to acute malnutrition, according to the Kenya Food Security Steering Group. Noting that about 1.5 million deaths of livestock have so far been reported in the arid and semi-arid lands ASOS, and that the situation is expected to be dire in light of expected projections that we may miss the normal cycle of rain expected in October, November and December 2022, and that this could be the worst drought we have experienced in 40 years. Concerned that the country is recording instances of conflict between crop farmers and the pastoralists over the scarce resource of water and the pasture, which results in the destruction of crops and deaths of livestock, further exacerbating the food crisis, and that the challenge of food shortage is now spreading to areas previously presumed to be rain-rich, such as Mount Kenya, whose residents are now relying on government emergency food supplies. Now, therefore, the Senate urges the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development to develop targeted policy programs aimed at addressing the food security in the country, including the following: coordinate with county government to establish strategic grain reserve across the country within drought-stricken areas receiving priority. 2, develop livestock feeding programs in ASO regions, providing water and feeds to the livestock farmers. 3, coordinate with the National Drought Management Authority to do quarterly reports to the Senate on the drought situation in the country. 4, subsidize agricultural production. And number 5, establish abattoirs in ASO counties, and further recommends that the National Treasury and Economic Planning increases funding to the National Drought Disaster Fund. I hereby give notice.
Clerk, next order. There's a notice of motion by Senator Veronica, but pursuant to our request, that has been deferred to further notice. Next order, Clerk.
Order number 7, statements.
Honorable Chirange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The statement of an issue of general topical concern on the superb performance by our athletes in the New York Marathon by the name Amos Chebet, Amos Evans Chebet, and Sharon Lokedi at 2022 New York Marathon, which happened a few weeks ago. Mr. Speaker, sir, I raise pursuant to Standing Order 52-1 to make a statement on an issue of general topical concern and national importance, namely superb performance by Evans Chebet and Sharon Lokedi at the just concluded New York Marathon. Mr. Speaker, sir, Evans Chebet won the men's title at the New York Marathon held on 6 November 2022 by clocking 2 hours, 8 minutes and 41 seconds. Chebet won his first international race at Buenos Aires Marathon, that is in Argentina, in a time of 2 hours, 5 minutes. Then in March 2020, he won the Lake Biwa Marathon in 2 hours, 7 minutes and 29 seconds. Later in December of the same year, Chebet set a world record when he won the 2020 Valencia Marathon in 2 hours, 3 minutes and 0 seconds. In the women's marathon, and by the way, let people not be confused, Evans Chebet is a man. In Kalenjin, there is always interchanging of names. It depends with the sub-tribes within the Kalenjin you come from. In the women's marathon, Sharon Lokedi won the title in 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 23 seconds, bringing glory to Kenya. Lokedi had raced at college at Kansas, where she was the champion in 10,000 meters in 2018. Mr. Speaker, sir, by winning the medical event, and it has to be noted to the House, New York Marathon is one of the 5 renowned international best marathons in the world, validated the first Grand Slam in history for our nation on the world circuit. Our athletes have won all 6 events on the program in 2022. Evans Chebet, who won in Boston, took 2 of them, as Eliud, the renowned, or these people call God, the renowned legend called Eliud Kipchoge, who comes from my county, won in Tokyo 6 and Berlin in 25th September. Amos Kipruta, who also comes from my county, Nandi, won in London on 2nd October, and Benson Kipruta won in Chicago 9 October to complete an outstanding performance. Mr. Speaker, this is not a mean achievement by these athletes that they have won almost all the 6 events against that has been organized in the calendar of 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, in conclusion, I wish to continue to call upon the government to use the upcoming and promising athletes as brand ambassadors, issue them with diplomatic passports, and ensure their finances and rewards are proper and not taxed and well structured to enable them to grow and remain motivated at all times. Like the way they happen in Uganda, Mr. Speaker, you win, they give you a car, they build your parents a house, and they ensure they welcome you in a grand manner. And Mr. Speaker, if you are single, the Ugandan government can go ahead and provide with you a wife or a spouse or a girlfriend. On behalf of the great people of Nandi County, the source of champions where Evans Chebet trains, Eliud Kipchoge, Amos Kipruta, another collegiate of athletes, I wish to congratulate them, Mr. Speaker, on this achievement of winning the 6 of them, and wish them well, ensuring of my commitment and the commitment of the Senate and Parliament at all times as they continue with their careers, Mr. Speaker. Even I want to, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, to call upon, even as this issue of doping, Mr. Speaker, continues to rear its ugly head, the solution in handling issue of doping, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, is not only banning the athletes. We must go, Mr. Speaker, for the medics suspending their licenses.
Senator, are you debating your own statement?
I'm concluding. My concluding remarks. I'm not debating. Just concluding. Mr. Speaker, it is not fair to only ban the athletes only, the people who are involved in these issues of banning, like the medical doctors who participate, the nurses, their licenses must be withdrawn. The hospitals and pharmacies that participate in doping must be suspended or closed. And Mr. Speaker, the DCI and DPP must even arrest coaches and team managers and train camp owners who aid and abet some of these and ensuring that our athletes are banned. And Mr. Speaker, we are not careful, we might go the Russian way where the athletics and Russia as a country has been banned from participating. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I thank you and thank you for this indulgence.
Honorable Senator Kinyu.
Asante Bwana Spika, nataka kuunga mkono taarifa hiyo na kusema ya kwamba ni vizuri hawa wanariadha ambao wamebombea waweze kutwikwa majukumu mengine kama kuwa mabalozi ambao watakuwa wakipeperusha bendera yetu katika nchi za uraibuni, Bwana Spika. Na ni jambo la kuvunja moyo sana, na kwa sababu huwa tunawapongeza wakati huu, lakini baadaye katika maisha yao unapata wanaishi katika hali ya uchochole, Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri hata baada ya wao kufanya vizuri waweze kupelekwa katika shule ambazo wafunzwe jinsi ya kutumia zile hela zao ambazo zitatumika wakati wao wa usoni, baada ya wao kuwa hawezi kukimbia, hawezi kujumuika katika biashara zingine. Bwana Spika, ni vizuri vile ambavyo tumeweza kuwapongeza wakati huu, si kuwakumbuka tu wakati ambapo wamekumbwa na shida. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, nataka kuunga mkono vile ambavyo Mheshimiwa Seneta rafiki yangu kutoka Nandi Cherargei alivyosema ya kwamba serikali ichukue majukumu, tuweze kutumia hawa wanariadha wawe mabalozi, waweze kuwakilisha Kenya yetu katika sehemu ambazo natembelea. Nashukuru Bwana Spika kunipa fursa hii na asante.
Senator Mariam Omar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health regarding enrollment of residents of Mandera County to National Health Insurance Fund and release of capitations to hospitals in the county. In the statement, committee should, 1, find out and report to Senate the number of residents of Mandera County who have enrolled in National Health Insurance Fund, stating distribution in enrollment in NHIF in various demographics. Secondly, provide list of credit NHIF hospitals and health facilities in Mandera County for both outpatients and inpatient medical services. Thirdly, state capitation amount paid to public and private facilities, private health facilities registered with NHIF for service rendered to patients for the last 3 financial years to date. Give reasons for instance of delays by NHIF in releasing funds to health facilities. Finally, Mr. Speaker, state measures, if any, put in place to ensure there are no delays in releasing capitations to NHIF credited health facilities in Mandera County. Thank you.
Clerk, this is a technical hitch. I cannot see any of the senators who would wish maybe to. So how do we get to know? Senator Chiranke.
Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate Senator Mariam Omar, one of my committee members, for this statement. I think the issue of universal health care, Mr. Speaker, is very critical. As Kenya Kwanza, the government has a plan on the issue of universal health coverage. And Mr. Speaker, the issue of NHIF should be available and accessible to every Kenyan. Mr. Speaker, everybody is aware on the 4th schedule that one of the important things and one of the key functions is on the issue of health, Mr. Speaker. So when you talk about the issue of NHIF, I know NHIF is trying to do its best in terms of revamping and making sure it is accessible, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to call the Committee of Health to look at this matter. I've seen Senator Jackson Mandago, who is the chair of Health Committee, must look, and if there are any reforms that are needed within NHIF, Mr. Speaker, we must look at that properly, Mr. Speaker, because when you look at this issue of Mandera, it must be looked properly. And I hope with the new county government, now that county governments have settled, Mr. Speaker, we must be aware. And Mr. Speaker, we don't want to see a collusion between the county government, Mr. Speaker, and some busybodies within the NHIF who want to take advantage of that problem. And Mandera has more problems than somebody stealing or making sure they can access the NHIF card. As you are aware, Mandera is one of the counties, Mr. Speaker, that is ravaged by drought and famine. So if it reaches this level, Mr. Speaker, where the county government does not do its job, Mr. Speaker, then somebody must be called out. So I hope the Health Committee led by Senator Jackson Mandago will summon the Minister of Health, the CEO of NHIF must come, And the governor of Mandera must also come. And it is good the senator of Mandera is here, who is also the party leader, Mr. Speaker. The senator must also be there, Mr. Speaker, to look at this issue so that we have a closure on this matter, Mr. Speaker. And I think neighbors like Senator Dulo from Isiolo and all of us can be invited as a committee of the whole, Mr. Speaker, because NHIF is a national issue. So I want to thank Senator Omar for bringing this issue to the fore, Mr. Speaker, and call upon NHIF, even as we look at this in conclusion, Mr. Speaker. Can NHIF give us a short-term solution, Mr. Speaker? Because, you know, sickness does not knock on the door, Mr. Speaker. It cannot say today you will be sick, so you should be ready. So can the health committee, and I can see members led by Senator Mandago, give even Mr. Speaker with an indulgence on standing order number 1. Can they even by next week, Tuesday, because this is an urgent matter, come even with a short-term solution on what can be done so that these NHIF card holders, Mr. Speaker, can still continue receiving medical care as we look into the issue. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity.
Senator Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, I also rise to support Senator Mariam and support that it should go to the Health Committee. Mr. Speaker.
Senator Adulo, what is your intervention? What is your point of order? Proceed, Senator Mungatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every time we hear issues to do with counties such as Mandera or Wajir, or counties like Tana River, Mr. Speaker, we are always suffering from the same kind of issues of deficit in terms of government services availability. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support my colleague here in how she sought this statement, and I'm asking the Health Committee to investigate about this universal health coverage in that county. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Dulo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to congratulate Senator Mariam for this statement. And I wish to state, Mr. Speaker, that health is a right. And it is important that all Kenyans are supposed to be provided with health care. Mr. Speaker, there is a big problem with NHIF, and especially last government actually brought in the issue of universal health care. And a lot of money went into it. And if I remember very well, universal health care had connection to NHIF. And if you look back and see how universal healthcare was rolled out and the way it is being operationalized right now, it's like nothing has happened. And I think this matter that has been raised by Senator Mariam, it's a matter that is affecting the whole country, all the counties, Mr. Speaker. If the Minister for Health and the CEO of NHIF can tell us how NHIF is rolled out, the impact of NHIF, how they are reimbursing the institutions, I think that is really very critical so that we can have a comprehensive report and audit and overhaul NHIF functions in this country. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mandago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement by Senator Mariam on this matter of NHIF, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a serious issue with NHIF, particularly on the reimbursements to public facilities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I say this having been immediate former governor for Uasin Gishu County, that there has been a trend that has been set by NHIF where public hospitals are not reimbursed regularly, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the delay can be even as far as 6 months, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the reimbursements from NHIF are the funds that sustain these facilities, Mr. Speaker. because those are the funds the facilities are able to spend within the facilities. Mr. Speaker, there's a serious problem looking at that trend. But if you go to private facilities, Mr. Speaker, you will find that there is no inordinate delay in reimbursing private facilities. Mr. Speaker, therefore, my committee says of this matter, and we are going to look into this matter, and I agree with the Senator for Nandi, Senator Cherargei, that the CEO and the management of NHIF should appear before our committee, Mr. Speaker, so that we put this matter to rest. Mr. Speaker, it looks like in all counties at the moment, the NHIF is not working. I'm also aware, Mr. Speaker, that even in the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, there is a very serious issue of NHIF, and now patients are no longer even getting services at MTRH because of these NHIF reimbursements that are not happening, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the rollout of the Universal Health Care Program that was rolled out was done in a hurry, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, you may recall that even the pilot that was done in 4 counties, Mr. Speaker, the results of that pilot was not shared publicly, and we could not get the lessons from the pilot of the rollout of UAC, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this House must say this matter. Considering that health is a devolved function, Mr. Speaker, we as senators, Mr. Speaker, should look into the reforms in terms of legislation and the composition of NHIF so that we, the defenders of counties, Mr. Speaker, ensure counties have a role and a say in the running of NHIF, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I therefore support the statement by Senator Mariam and say that this, our health committee is seized of this matter. And amongst others that have been raised.
It actually supplements the basic right, that is the right to life. It is therefore important as a Mr. Speaker, we have been talking about universal health care. Election after election, we see manifestos promising to deliver on universal health care. But when implementation comes, you see governments picking something like maternal health alone and calling that their way of implementing universal health care. Mr. Speaker, you have been a governor, and other governors who've been here know that the biggest bill, even for county governments, is the health sector bill in terms of managing, and yet it is never adequate. We still don't have enough service providers, we don't pay health care providers well enough, and our public hospitals are in pathetic conditions. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to suggest something that is very radical, that this House, I hope, can be a house of reason that can begin to advocate for a radical move in order to get this country to truthfully deliver on universal health. Mr. Speaker, I want to propose that all NHIF funds that are paid in respect of bills that touch upon all senior public servants be paid to public hospitals only. If we do that, Mr. Speaker, we will be investing the monies that we have in our own public hospitals, and in doing so, we will be able to handhold the so-called hustlers that my brother Khalwale speaks about. But if my brother Khalwale wants to go to Nairobi Hospital and take all the funds to Nairobi Hospital, but his hospital in Kakamega is not good enough for him to go to, if the governor of Nairobi cannot go to Mbagathi, but wants to go to Nairobi Hospital, if the governor of Nakuru cannot go to needs to be flown to Nairobi in order to be taken care of, but cannot go to the county facility that he's in charge of, then there is something wrong. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of the UK goes to a public hospital. The President of India goes to a public hospital. It is time that we, first of all, reorganize the NHIF, but also took care of that NHIF to ensure that the bills, at least paid by taxpayers, in respect of public servants, all of them, state officers and others, should first go towards supporting hospitals like Kenyatta so that the same funds can take care of the ordinary public members who go to Kenyatta. Mr. Speaker, I also want to support Senator Mandago's suggestion that it is time also to restructure the parastatals that are holding county functions or that are working towards county functions to ensure that they become intergovernmental parastatals. NHIF is one of these. We need to reorganize it to clean up what everybody knows it is, but also to reorganize it so that it's an intergovernmental body where even the Council of Governors will have a right to appoint some of those who go to the board and to help so that we have a board that is holistic, representing both county and national government interest in order to steer this well. And if we do this, Mr. Speaker, the facilities in remote areas, the facilities in counties that have historically been marginalized will start coming up. So I want to support and ask that we start thinking radically if we actually want to achieve universal health service. I support, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Roba.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the statement shared by Senator Mariam and expounded on by Senator Muma and Senator Mandago and Cherargei. I want to share this. As counties strive to improve service quality, over the 10 years that we've had devolution, health sector has tremendously improved. And I'm talking from experience in terms of where we were in Mandera and where we are right now, and in terms of health sector improvement. NSSF can really support that improvement by making sure they prudently reimburse clients that go to government hospitals, because county governments are striving, and I'm aware that county governments are in the face of establishing amenity wards, where people will be able to pay nominal fees and be able to get the same services that they're able to get from private hospitals. But unfortunately, the information shared is extremely accurate based on my own experience as a former governor of Mandera, that NSSF does not expeditiously reimburse government hospitals at the same speed as they reimburse private hospitals. And as such, you find that claims are launched by county hospitals, and you will find that the claims will be rested so that Nairobi Hospital, Aga Khan, and the rest are reimbursed. If NSSF is put to task so that they consider reimbursement requests at the same level, speed, and priority as those from the private hospitals, then county government hospitals and hospitals run by government will be able to plow that money back and make sure that service, service improvement can be undertaken alongside investment that is being done by county government. Statistical data will indicate that in each of the 47 county governments, the highest budget allocation of the 10 ministries that the county governments run is in the health sector in terms of the allocation that county governments do. So there is no underinvestment under the circumstance with the limited resources that county governments are able to get from the shareable revenue shared by county governments. Complementing efforts like the government of the day striving to make universal health care work, and then institutions that will have fast-tracked that implementation, such as NSSF, applying that spirit of all of us are equal, but others are more equal than others, meaning private hospitals are priority, government hospitals are tertiary priority, and because of that, I believe that it will be extremely important for the health committee to be able to call NSSF in the actual sense, because the minister for health and that may be just collateral damage, but this is entirely 100% under the control of NSSF. The CEO of NSSF need to be put to task in order to make sure that they go alongside the spirit of the government of the day of improving and establishing universal healthcare. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Veronica.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the right to health is guaranteed under Article 43 of the Constitution. The fact that this right is guaranteed under this article means that it's an important right under the Bill of Rights, the socio-economic rights. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I rise to support the statement by Senator Mariam, it is sad that an institution like NHIF would be causing public health institutions to be driven to their knees in terms of not having resources to render quality health care. So my proposition, Mr. Speaker, sir, just in as much as the contribution towards the NHIF is done in a timely manner every month and submitted to the NHIF, Mr. Speaker, sir, this House must, number one, take up the challenge to ensure that every regulation and every rule binds NHIF to make sure all the bills are rendered within a certain time frame, and to ensure, Mr. Speaker, sir, that these bills that are being raised by public institutions, which have a direct impact to the quality of healthcare that is being rendered to Kenyan, Mr. Speaker, sir, is not impacted by the delay that is being caused by NHIF in meeting its needs, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I support the statement by the Senator, very wise statement from the Senator, that time has come for NHIF to drop the bad culture of failing to support their service by making sure that they pay up whatever needs to be paid up to the institutions which are public in nature. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, it should be treated as impunity if NHIF can pay the private hospitals in good time and fail to pay the public hospitals in the same period of time. Mr. Speaker, sir, their service charter must treat every institution equally and must be able to meet the conditions of those institutions in the manner in which it will deliver quality health care to all Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, sir, before I sit, let me note that if a Kenyan has an accident on Mombasa Road, the first hospital of intervention is most likely to be a public institution. It's a public hospital. It is not going to be a private hospital. So the longer we keep our public hospitals in a deplorable manner, the harder it will be for Kenyans to be able to access, and not just one Kenyan, but all Kenyans who are utilizing the services of healthcare within the Republic of Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I take this opportunity to support the statement by Senator Mariam and to ask the committee to put to task the NHIF on accounting on why they cannot improve their service to make healthcare an achievable right in the Republic of Kenya.
This statement is referred to the relevant committee for consideration. Senator James Kamau.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have several statements that I request to ask for. If you allow, I can go through them in consecutively. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the skewed distribution of relief food in Kirinyaga County. In the statement, the committee should, 1, state the criteria used to identify the beneficiary of relief food being distributed by government agencies and measures, if any, to ensure that such relief food fully benefits the targeted people. Number 2, explain why Marurumo, Siagini, Ndorome, and Indiroku areas in Kirinyaga County were not considered for provision of relief food, despite being severely drought hit. And 3, outline plans the government has put in place to ensure that there is sufficient relief food aid stock in order to ensure all targeted population in drought hit regions of the county benefit and deal conclusively with drought and food shortage. Mr. Speaker, my second statement. Mr. Speaker, sir, again I rise pursuant to the same Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding the security situation in Kirinyaga County. In the statement, the committee should, 1, explain the circumstances that has led to the escalating cases of insecurity in Kerugoya, Sagana, Gorobani, Kagumo, and Kagio areas in Kirinyaga County following the recent wave of thefts and muggings. 2, state the number of reported insecurity incidents in the affected areas of Kerugoya, stating the nature of the incidents, victims targeted, including the number of fatalities and those injured, and the interventions made by the police to bring to book those behind the reported wave of insecurity in Kirinyaga County. 3, outline immediate and long-term action being taken by the Minister of Interior National Administration to curb insecurity in Kirinyaga, including dealing with outlawed gangs like Wesame that are terrorizing residents of Kirinyaga Central. Mr. Speaker, my third statement, in pursuant to Standing Order 53.1, I seek the statement from the Standing Committee of Road, Transportation and Housing on speeding by driver transporting miraa through Kirinyaga County. In the statement, the committee should, 1, appraise the Senate on the extent of compliance to provisions stipulated in the Traffic Act by driver transporting miraa. 2, state the measures put in place, if any, to curb accidents caused by the drivers who continue to create havoc on the Ndiroku Gathigiri Prison Road, and the Viva, Soil, Muruvara, and Gurvan areas in the country. And 3, enumerate the action being taken by the government to ensure peaceful coexistence among road users, including motorists, cyclists, pedestrians, and dealing strictly with traffic offenders to curb cases of traffic offenses and accidents. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 53.1, I rise to seek the statement from the Standing Committee of Labor and Social Welfare on the older person cash transfer program. In the statement, the committee should, 1, outline plans by the government, if any, to register more beneficiaries to the older person's cash transfer, OPCT program, considering that the last registration was done 3 years ago. 2, state measures put in place by the government to ensure timely disbursement of the funds to the elderly. And 3, inform the Senate on the steps being taken to update the list of beneficiaries to exclude deceased individuals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Osotsi. Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1.
Senator Osotsi, you had made a request, so you're on your feet for purposes of making a contribution to that. If you're not ready, then I will call.
Well guided. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to comment on one of his statements on the issue of distribution of food to people affected by the famine.
I noted that one of the issues he raised is about the system of distributing this food. Looks like the system of identifying the particular people who are supposed to benefit is not that efficient. And that raises concerns because there was a recommendation, even from the IMF and other donors, that the government changes from food distribution, physical food distribution, to cash transfers, which was more efficient. It had less challenges of procurement and corruption. And I wonder why the government has gone back to physical distribution of food, which has a lot of challenges, procurement, even logistical challenges, and even corruption. So I think it's an important issue that Senator for Kirinyaga has come up with, and I ask the relevant committee to quickly move in and request for sufficient information from the relevant ministry so that we don't expose ourselves to corruption that is likely to arise as a result of this crisis, disaster that we have. So I commend the senator for bringing this to the House, and I ask the committee to quickly do a report to this House on this matter so that we can save this country a lot of money, which is likely to get lost as a result of corrupt practices by some public officers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chiranke.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, out of the many statements that Senator Murango has said, Kamau, one of the statements that struck me is on the older person's cash transfer. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend and congratulate Senator Kamau that is learning very fast and becoming very industrious. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, because all of us at some point, we shall get old, and we need the government to take care of us at some point in life, except when you are a pensioner. Mr. Speaker, it is very sad that registration of older persons in terms of cash transfer, Mr. Speaker, and I asked this question during the last session of Senate before we adjourned for elections, that it is done 3 years. It should be done even monthly, because people grow old. It does not mean that it is only after 3 years that people retire and get the age that is required. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, looking at the life expectancy, we should in fact lower the age of registering under the older persons cash transfer program, even bringing at 60 years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even the Bible talks about 70 to 80 years. 60 to 70 years, or is 70 to 80, how do you register somebody who is from 70 and above? The retirement age of any person is 60 years, Mr. Speaker, and therefore, in fact, it should be lowered to be 55 to 60 years. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, these are old men. Mr. Speaker, when you go to towns in Kapsabet, in Eldoret, in Vihiga, in Kilifi, you find wazee from all those small villages boarded a matatu all the way to towns. Mr. Speaker, they are old, they can't cross the road, they are illiterate, they are in poor health, Mr. Speaker. You go and allow them sit on the verandas to be taken advantage by the vagabonds at the cities and centers, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Treasury and Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare must be creative enough, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that even if they should send, in fact, the M-Pesa, Mr. Speaker, to those who are there wherever they are in the village at their convenience, so that they don't need to travel using matatus. They are sick. Some of them do not have a support system, Mr. Speaker. We must be creative so that we don't subject our people to go to withdraw, Mr. Speaker. Now, finally, Mr. Speaker, the commercial banks, and I don't want to name the names of those commercial banks. Mr. Speaker, those commercial banks are taking advantage. And for example, Mr. Speaker, without naming these commercial banks, why would you give a certain commercial bank that does not have even their agent up to the lowest, some small center somewhere in, for example, Chepterwai Center, somewhere in Masab sub-county, Mr. Speaker, or somewhere in Mwombo, a farthest corner, somewhere in Tindret sub-county. Yet you give a bank, Mr. Speaker, that even do not have even 1 or 2 branches in Kapsabet town, which is the sub-county headquarters or the county headquarters of Nandi County, Mr. Speaker, or somewhere in Kilifi. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, let us either use M-Pesa. I know some people might complain that they are being blacklisted through CRB. Mr. Speaker, there is an amnesty from the government up to early next year. And in fact, mercy, Mr. Speaker, that is only given once in a lifetime has been given to the CRB listing holders, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge that our elder people, Mr. Speaker, have served this nation. Let us treat them with dignity that it serves by ensuring that there is transparency, Mr. Speaker, and accountability, Mr. Speaker. And finally, when this committee appears, the PS in charge and the minister, Mr. Speaker, must tell us for the last 3 years, Mr. Speaker, for the last 3 years, they must tell us how much have they dispensed to how many elderly people in this republic, who are they, the ID number. Mr. Speaker, because we are being told, Mr. Speaker, in the last era of Uhuru Kenyatta, last 3 months he used 50 billion that no one can account for. So we don't want to be told 50 billion was used to give to Wazee, yet we don't know what that Wazee was, Mr. Speaker. And maybe they were being used by Azimio campaigns, Mr. Speaker. So that issue must be handled with properly, because we cannot operate the transition of a government, Mr. Speaker. We want to protect going into the future, Mr. Speaker. You cannot use 50 billion and you cannot account for it, Mr. Speaker. These people must tell us where the money is. What they cannot tell us, they gave it to Wazee, yet they were using for Azimio One Kenya lands campaigns in the Kenya Republic, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Senator Beatrice Akinyi.
Honorable Speaker, allow me just to go straight to my point without deviating to the sentiments by the Honorable Senator for Nandi. Honorable Speaker, I rise to make a point on the statement of the Honorable Senator for Kirinyaga, and specifically about the older person's cash transfer. Honorable Speaker, if there's anything the government has done well and had a good intention, it is about this cash transfer. Honorable Speaker, when this initiative was begun with the Grand Coalition government, the older persons in the 2 pilot areas of Nyeri and Bondo where it began, if anybody would reflect and see how those old people looked like, it was so pathetic, Honorable Speaker. But as soon as this fund was disbursed, and with the time, Honorable Speaker, you saw the honor and you saw the dignity of these older persons that were receiving these funds. Honorable Speaker, I rise to emphasize the fact that this is a fund that has given, restored the dignity of our older persons, and all we may ask for is that, Honorable Speaker, it should be disbursed in a timely manner. Honorable Speaker, these funds are used for the upkeep of these older persons. If they are to be made use of well with the people that benefit for them, that must be done in a timely way. Thus, the factor of timeliness. And Honorable Speaker, my take on the fund is that The Honorable Senator asked about when other older persons will be registered. For me, I would emphasize that all the older persons in this republic must be registered to benefit from this fund. Honorable Speaker, because specifically, most of the beneficiaries are always people who have a lot of responsibility, older people that have lost their children and they take care of grandsons and granddaughters. And Honorable Speaker, if you look at some of the benefits, this amount, however little some of us might consider it to be, some of the people that benefit from these monies have even taken their grandsons and granddaughters to local schools around where they stay. So, Honorable Speaker, as I support this statement, I would like to say that the government must go forth to register all older persons into this scheme and let the disbursement also be timely. Honorable Speaker, I support this statement.
Honorable Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to request for a statement on the effects of government austerity measures on the hotel industry. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Trade, Industrialization and Tourism regarding the effects of government austerity measures have on the hotel industry. In the statement, the committee should, 1, state the measures, if any, that the government is taking to help the hotel industry to recover from the effects of COVID-19 pandemic due to low volumes of international booking that has led to closures of several hotels: Intercontinental Hotel, Laiko Hotel, Radisson Blu, and now the imminent closure of the historic Hilton Hotel. 2, explain what informed the recent presidential directive to shove off 300 billion shillings from the current financial budget by, among other measures, discontinuing trainings, conferences, and other events by government ministries and agencies in hotels, which will exacerbate the already difficult operating environment for hotels. 3, table the assessment report done by the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Heritage on how the proposed austerity measures would affect the hotel industry and indicate the measures being taken to alleviate the negative effects caused to complementary industries such as transport, aviation, and agriculture that depend on the hotel industry. 4, state whether the relevant industry stakeholders, such as the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers, were involved in the decision to impose austerity measures, and clarify whether donor-sponsored events in facilities, hotel facilities, will also be affected by this directive. 5, outline any additional policies the government is implementing to seal budget cuts in government and actions put in place, if any, to ensure that funds are not lost through corruption and tax evasion, which necessitates drastic and punitive austerity measures. And lastly, number 6, table a detailed status report on the successes or failure of such past austerity measures by the past government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senator Mazayo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, First and foremost, I would like to congratulate my colleague for bringing this statement. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, it is not only in the hotels as stated, like the imminent closure now of Hilton Hotel. Hilton Hotel, as far as we are concerned, is an iconic hotel. It's among the first hotels we have had in this country. And it's going to be very unfortunate if the government will allow it to sink, knowing very well the efforts we have made to ensure that we rescue Kenya Airways. Mr. Speaker, it is also it's also important to note that in Kilifi, if there's any place that has been badly affected by this mismanagement of the tourism industry, then Kilifi is one of the areas that has been hard hit. We have hotels like, iconic hotels like Lawford's Hotel. There are hotels like the Whispering Palms. We have the Angels Bay. There are quite a number of hotels which those days, if I can remember, tourists used to be so many in Malindi and Kilifi in general, and the coast, basically. It was a tourist destination. But now, as we can see, it has been neglected. I want to call upon the Ministry of Tourism to wake up. There is so much corruption in that area, in the ministry. And if at all we can, the government can put a lot of concentration on how we can rescue or how we can bring back tourism in this country, then it will go a long way to help or alleviate in creation of jobs, job opportunities, in creation of quite a number of infrastructure in certain areas, and opportunities for everyone. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Senator Boni.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to congratulate Honorable Sotsi, the Senator of Vihiga, for this very important statement. For a long time, agriculture was a main forex exchange earner for this country. And because not too much thought has been put into it, this iconic status has now been lost, and it is being lost to unpredictable products like the inflow of funds from Kenyans living in the diaspora. Mr. Speaker, we need to take it even more aggressively so that over and above reviving tourism as it has been, we should cause tourists to come to Kenya for other reasons other than the big five in our wildlife and our sandy beaches at the coast. Mr. Speaker, if you come to the western part of Kenya, the tourist potential is massive, but it is not marketed as an alternative to the big five. Mr. Speaker, in Western, starting from Lake Victoria, the Kitmigai, going to the Vihiga stones, going to the Kakamega forest, going to Elesi stone, the crying stone of Africa. Mr. Speaker, all the way to the rich culture of Isukuti and bullfighting. There are things that can bring in billions of dollars on a weekly basis, and the product is not being developed. And as if it's not enough, you can see the hotels have collapsed. It is very sad that we understand even the hotel like the Hotel of Homa Bay, the hotel like Golf Hotel, they're all going under simply because of people not being aggressive enough. I therefore support and hope that this House will take it more aggressively than just taking it as a statement from a distinguished senator. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Senator Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that this is a very important statement from the Senator of Viga, my brother, Senator Osotsi. And we do understand very well that the government is trying as much as possible to impose some austerity measures, but hotels form a big base. Hotels in our counties, and my brother here will tell you that they form a big base of small and medium enterprises that you see many of the government policies trying to look at, in the sense that if you go anywhere in this county today, the real estate industry in mostly far-flung counties tend to be around hotels. And therefore, we should not look at hotels as mere functions of the big players. But hotels forms a very big base of small, medium enterprises in this country. And trying to put austerity measures that indict hotels, that we cannot be able to go to these hotels and do meetings, is actually killing the same economy that the government is trying to face. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this, and I hope people like my brother, Matthew, who I know is in the deep state. I want to say this, Mr. Speaker. Our approach to austerity measures in this country is a wanting one. Because what's happening in this country is very simple. We are in a country where it looks like we have a river that is flowing, and there are people who have
Senator Kamau, what is your point of order? Okay, proceed, Senator.
Sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. So we do have an economy that works like this. It's like a river where we've got resources flowing downstream. And then somebody has dug dams around this river. After digging the dam, under the dam, there is another porosity that is going on. The policy we are seeing is an attempt to reduce expenses in government. But this is a wrong target, because we know very well that in this country, the income element and the expense element are a function of what is happening in KRA and in procurement, Mr. Speaker. We know that tax collection in this country is what is putting us into serious problems, because we know that the tax collectors, people are paying a lot of taxes in this country, and those taxes can actually be able to finance government budgets. But what is happening is that there is a lot of leakages with our taxes that they don't end up getting to government. Today you want to take 300 billion out of the hotel industry, when actually there is almost the same amount of money that goes to real estate by tax collectors who do not allow these taxes to reach to government. We have got a lot of buildings in this city today called Nairobi that have been built by KRA officials that are picking money and not allow them to get to government. And this is quite known. So we want to encourage the government that the first thing to do is, first of all, to stop leakages that we are seeing in KRA, that the money doesn't get to the government. And then secondly, Mr. Speaker, the value for money that the government is attempting to address comes with serious leakages with procurement officers. Mr. Speaker, procurement officers in this country today have made it impossible for government to get value of money. We go to government staff and you realize that the procurement things that are done there are always inflated to suit people working in government. So my plea with the government is not to target the wrong areas. I don't think that there's a problem with government officials being able to do their meetings in conducive areas, Mr. Speaker. You can imagine, Mr. Speaker, when we were doing the training, we just came from our recess, And when we're doing training in Mombasa, in very nice hotel, and you know, we were very relaxed. I can imagine if we were to all be placed into these chambers, Mr. Speaker, for about the 5 days that we were having, I don't think we'll be as effective as we were. That is the atmosphere that we need to create, whereby leakages and porosity that we are seeing in the procurement and the collection of revenue in this country can be corrected, rather than targeting small and medium enterprises in the name of hotels. And I hope that my brother, Senator Cherargei, will have the courage to convey this kind of ideas to the government. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia maombi ya taarifa kutoka kwa Senator Ososi. Mheshimiwa Spika, kama tunavyojua nchi yetu ilikumbwa na janga la corona, na vile vile baada ya hapo ukawa na wasiwasi juu ya uchaguzi mkuu ambao ulifanyika mnamo tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8 mwaka huu. Mheshimiwa Spika, yote hiyo iliathiri uchumi na hususan uchumi wa utalii, kwa sababu utalii unapendelea mazingira ambayo kuna utulivu na kuna usalama katika mahali ambapo watalii wanasafiri. Mheshimiwa Spika, sasa ambapo uchaguzi umekwisha na uchumi umeanza kufufuka, ndio Wakenya wengi wanapata fursa, na pia mashirika na wafanyikazi wa serikali wanapata fursa ya kwenda katika mikutano ili kuweza kujadili miradi na masuala mengine ya kuendesha serikali. Mheshimiwa Spika, hii kuzuiliwa kwa kufanyika mikutano katika mahoteli itaathiri pakubwa uchumi, na vile vile pia itaathiri biashara ya utalii, kwa sababu utalii mwingi unaofanyika sasa, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni wa mikutano, conference tourism. Ndio utapata ukienda Mombasa hivi sasa utapata hoteli kama Pride imejaa, hoteli kama White Sands imejaa, ukienda hoteli kama Serena imejaa, ukienda Naivasha pia vile vile utapata kwamba hoteli nyingi zimeweza kujaa, kwa sababu mashirika mengi na wizara za serikali zinachukua fursa hii kufanya mikutano katika hoteli zile. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, iwapo agizo hili litatekelezwa, ina maana kwamba zile hoteli ambazo zilikuwa zatarajia kupata mapato, kwa sababu mwaka huu wa mwaka 2022 ni kama ambao Mheshimiwa Spika umepotea. Kwanza tulikuwa tuna recover kutokana na janga la corona. Baadaye kukaingia makampeni ambapo watu wengi walikuwa hawako tayari kuondoka mazingira yao majumbani kwao kwenda kutembelea mahoteli kwa sababu ya wasiwasi. Alafu sasa hii serikali imepiga marufuku mikutano katika kufanyika katika mahoteli kama hayo. Hii Mheshimiwa Spika inamaanisha kwamba wale wawekezaji katika biashara za hoteli wataposa kupata faida yoyote katika mwaka huu 2022. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, agizo hili litaathiri uchumi, kwa sababu mapato pia yanayotokamana na biashara ya utalii yataweza kupungua, na hivyo hata yale malengo ya serikali kukusanya zile pesa walizopanga kusanya mwezi wa 6 budget iliposomwa haitawezekana. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa swala hili liangaliwe kwa haraka, kwa sababu tayari tunaona kwamba tunafikia mwisho wa mwaka na wangependelea kuweza kupata faida angalau kidogo, waweze kuregesha rasilimali zao katika mwaka huu 2022. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Kamau.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipatia nafasi hii. Naweza kuchukua hii nafasi pia nimshukuru Senator Ososi kwa kuweza kuleta hii statement. Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka nichukue hii nafasi niseme kwamba utalii, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kitega uchumi kikubwa cha Jamhuri yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nimetoka katika kaunti ya Lamu ambao iko katika Jumuiya ya Pwani. Mheshimiwa Spika, unaelewa vizuri kabisa sisi watu wa Lamu tunategemea zaidi uchumi wa utalii. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, utalii ni jambo ambalo Lamu kwa muda mrefu sana tumeweza kujivunia, na umeweza kuajiri vijana wengi sana pale kwetu kaunti ya Lamu, na ndiposa Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nataka ni support vile ambavyo waheshimiwa wenzangu wameweza kusema ya kwamba utalii ni jambo ambalo serikali inafaa iditilie ama idichukulie na jambo la uzito sana, ikizingatiwa kwamba utalii umeajiri vijana wengi sana katika Jamhuri yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika kaunti ya Lamu inaweza kuaminika ya kwamba Lamu ni mahali ambapo kwa muda mrefu sana ni sehemu ambayo imejulikana kwamba utalii umeweza kubombea zaidi, na ndiposa ninataka kusema kwamba hoteli zitakapochukulia hatua ama serikali itakapokuwa inachukua hatua ya kupinga mikutano katika mahoteli yetu, itakuwa inaua uchumi wa nchi yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi ningependa kusema kwamba kule Lamu tuko na mahoteli mazuri sana. Hoteli kama vile Majlis Hotel, tuko na hoteli ambayo inaitwa Maharus Hotel, tuko na hoteli inaitwa Pepone Hotel, tuko na Janathan Hotel. Mheshimiwa, mahoteli haya yote ni mahoteli ambayo ni ya kifahari. Na nataka niseme kwamba ningependa kuongea pia, Mheshimiwa Spika, na bunge hili la Senate. Niseme kwamba huwa ninaudhika sana na nasikitika sana wakati ambapo mikutano mingi inaenda kufanywa Mombasa, Naivasha na Lamu. Mheshimiwa Spika, hatupati wageni kama wale wa Senate, ama serikali haitumi viongozi kwenda kule kuweza kufanya mikutano. Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka niseme kwamba ningetaka sana mara hii, Mheshimiwa Spika, nione delegation ya senators wote na members of parliament wameelekea huko Lamu kuweza kustarehe huko, kwa sababu ni sehemu ambayo ina mandhari mazuri ambayo wakienda pale watajivunia kuwa Wakenya wakiwa mahali pale. Ndiposa Mheshimiwa Spika, ninaomba sana kwamba tuweze kusupport jambo hili, na niseme kwamba clerks na deputy clerks ambao wako hapa mara hii waweze kupeana ama kutoa nafasi ya senators waweze kusafiri kwenda Lamu. Na pia niweze kuchukua nafasi pia, Mheshimiwa Spika, niweze kualika waheshimiwa wenzangu tarehe 24, 25 na 26 tuko na cultural festival ambayo, Mheshimiwa Spika, itakuwa inajumuisha mataifa mengi katika Jamhuri yetu ya Kenya, na ndiposa na katika ulimwengu mzima kutoka sehemu mbalimbali za ulimwengu Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndiposa naomba waheshimiwa waweze kuunganika na serikali na viongozi wote waweze kwenda huko waweze kujivinjari katika ile sehemu yetu ya Lamu. Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka niweze kusupport na niseme kwamba siku ya kwanza ama wakija pale Lamu, waheshimiwa senators watakaofika hapa, lunch ni mimi nitasimamia siku hiyo, na baadaye waweze kuspend ile per diem yote watapewa, waweze kuhakikisha kwamba wameispendi pale ili watu wa Lamu pia waweze kujivunia kwamba wamepata wageni kutoka Senate. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Honorable Senators, you will note from the order paper that there are two more statements by the Honorable Senator Professor Tom Ojenda. However, the Honorable Senator Tom Ojenda has made a request that we defer this to tomorrow, and pursuant to that request, I direct that those statements be deferred to tomorrow, 17th of November 2022. Next order, Clerk. Yes, what is your point of order?
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but I have a statement here which has been approved, and I thought I would be accorded an opportunity. I'm not in any way, Mr. Speaker, challenging your authority. I'm not in any way, as it is suggested by my young brother on the Gerard Gay. I'm not in any way trying to challenge the authority at all, at all. In fact, I think it's just an oversight. Maybe I could take it up tomorrow. I don't mind having it tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I said.
The Honorable Senator for Kilifi, kindly approach the chair. Kindly. Honorable Senators, I will allow the Senator for Kilifi to make his statement. Kindly proceed.
Asante Bwana Speaker. Asante sana Bwana Speaker. Cherargei is my brother, so it's quite okay. Mheshimiwa Speaker, nasimama kwa mujibu wa kanuni za kudumu katika kipengele cha 53 kuomba taarifa kutoka kwa kamati ya kudumu ya ardhi, mazingira na mali asili kuhusu kuvunjwa kwa nyumba na kufurushwa kwa wakaazi wa kijiji cha Pindukiani, wodi ya Ganda, katika eneo bunge la Malindi, kaunti ya Kilifi. Katika taarifa hiyo, kamati hii iangazie yafuatayo. Bwana Spika, la kwanza ni kwa sababu zipi zilizopelekea kuvunjwa kiharamu ama kinyume na sheria kwa makaazi ya familia zaidi ya 200 katika kijiji cha Pindukiani, wodi ya Ganda, eneo bunge la Malindi, katika kaunti ya Kilifi. Bwana Spika, ya pili ni kwa nini ubomozi huo ulitekelezwa kinyume na agizo la Mahakama Kuu lililosimamisha ubomozi hadi kesi ya mzozo kuhusu ardhi hiyo itakapotatuliwa. Ya tatu, umiliki sahihi wa hati miliki kutoka kwa wakaazi wa eneo hilo, na iwapo mhusika alibomoa alikuwa na kibali kutoka kwa mahakama kuidhinisha utekelezaji huo wa kubomoa nyumba hizo. Kwa sababu Bwana Spika, hapa kidogo si kufafanua vizuri, lakini ni kwamba kubomoa zile nyumba kama alikuwa na ile order ambayo kile kipande ambacho alikwenda kubomoa ndio hicho ambacho kilikuwa ameambiwa aende akabomoe, ama alienda akavamia kijiji kingine ambacho watu wako na hati milki na wakabomoa hicho, wakawacha kile ambacho walikuwa katika order yao. Ya mwisho Bwana Spika, ni kwamba nataka kamati hii izuru katika hichi kijiji cha Pindukiani na kubaini sehemu hiyo inayodhaniwa ya kwamba ilikuwa katika hiyo eneo ambalo ilikuwa latakana libomolewe, na kuona ya kwamba hawa watu 60 ama hizi ekari 60 ambazo zilifanywa ubomozi, je, hawa watu waliokuwa na kiti pale watalipwa rasilimali yao kivipi? Asante Bwana Speaker.
The Honorable Senator Mungatana.
I want to stand to support the request by the Honorable Senator Stewart Madzayo. Mr. Speaker, this issue of demolitions that are coming to people who are mostly not earning a lot is a very serious issue. And if I can relate, I think in that particular case, there was no following the laid down procedure. We know, Mr. Speaker, every time an order for demolition that is coming from the court, how it is implemented, the steps are very clear. That order is not to be effected just by auctioneers. It has to be taken to the police. The police, they take it to their seniors. It has to be done in such a manner that the police are satisfied that there is no case pending before court. Mr. Speaker, auctioneers have taken advantage of people and destroyed lives and life savings of many people. Auctioneers, Mr. Speaker, and it is evident even here in Nairobi, just recently, it was all over the television stations. Auctioneers, Mr. Speaker, have really made people to suffer. And Mr. Speaker, sometimes there's no following the procedure. Sometimes even the officers in police stations are compromised. Mr. Speaker, I know of a case in Malindi where an advocate that I know very well was even threatened by arrest because he went and told the officers who are executing that order that what you are doing is an old order. There is an existing order that says there should be stopping of this demolition until the pending case is heard. Mr. Speaker, we need to bring some order. And I pray that in this particular case, in Malindi, it would serve as a lesson. Mr. Speaker, I pray that that committee, when it goes there, all the people who are culpable of any procedural violations, appropriate actions are taken against them, Mr. Speaker. And also, there will be recommendations from that committee, Mr. Speaker, to look at the Auctioneers Act, to look at how demolitions, if it is a property that must be carried out. And Mr. Speaker, very serious consequences should follow. Not a consequence of an auctioneer demolishing a building and then you come to court and you are given a bond of 100,000 shillings to get out. And you have destroyed a livelihood like we saw the other day here in Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, it is the same even with those people who are living in small houses and in our villages. It should not happen. Not in this administration. It should not happen. Not in this new constitution. I support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honorable Senator Maruma.
Nashukuru Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa hii fursa ili kuchangia taarifa ambayo imetolewa na Mheshimiwa Seneta wa Kilifi, Mheshimiwa Stuart Mazayo, kuhusu shida ambayo imewakumba watu wa kijiji cha Pindukiani kule Kilifi. Mheshimiwa Spika, haya mambo ambayo ama kisa kilichowapata hawa watu wa Pindukiani si hapo peke yake, lakini Kenya nzima kumekuwa na madhila ambayo yamewakumba watu tofauti tofauti kwa sababu ya mashamba. Shida ya mashamba, Mheshimiwa Spika, imekuwa nyingi hii Kenya kwa sababu ya mabwenyenye ambao wanatumia saa zingine njia za mkato, njia za zisizo za kisheria ili kunyakua ardhi za wananchi ambao ni maskini na kuwaacha katika shida na tabu nyingi sana. Katika kamati ya ardhi ambayo nimekuwa katika bunge ya 12 na saizi pia katika bunge ya 13, kuna statement nyingi na kuna taarifa nyingi ambazo zinakuja katika hii kamati kwa sababu ya shida kama hizo. Na nafikiri kamati yetu ya ardhi italichukua hili jukumu ama hii shida ya watu wa Pindukiani na kulivalia njuga na kuingia na kuangalia kama tutasaidia hao watu wa Pindukiani namna gani. Tumeona watu wamebomolewa nyumba wengi na watu wanaopata shida wakati ubomozi kama huu, Mheshimiwa Spika, unapotokea, watu hupata shida ni kina mama na watoto. Tumetembea mitaa mingi na kwa mfano tulienda mwaka wa 2020 huku Diani, tukapata watu wamepata shida, wamebomolewa manyumba kwa sababu ya kutofuata sheria za kubomoa nyumba. Na wakati nyumba zinabomolewa, Mheshimiwa Spika, lazima tuweke pia ubinadamu kwa sababu ni wananchi watakaopata shida ambao ni maskini. Saizi tukiongea tulikuwa na taarifa kuhusu shamba la watu wa Msambweni, maeneo ya Voi, ambayo kiwanda cha Bata kilipewa shamba kule Voi na hawakujenga kiwanda. Baada ya miaka 2 vile walishurutishwa, na ile lease, lakini na wakaambiwa wasiuze ile shamba. Na saizi koti imepitisha ya kwamba watu zaidi ya 3,500 watolewe kule Msambweni Voi. Na ningependa kusema kwamba ni lazima pia tuvalie njuga hilo swala, kwa sababu najua serikali, ni jukumu la serikali kupeana makazi kwa wananchi, kupea shamba kwa wananchi. Kwa hivyo tutalivalia njuga pia ile swala la Voi Msambweni, ili wananchi wale wanunulie shamba na serikali na wapewe hati miliki na serikali. Kwa hivyo tutalivalia njuga hili swala la Pidukiani pamoja na lile swala la kule Voi, ambao kama kamati ya mashamba tumefanya mapendekezo ya kwamba serikali kupitia kwa settlement fund trustee board ile shamba inunuliwe ili wale wananchi wa pale Voi wapewe. Na hii pia ya Pidukiani, wale wananchi wanafaa kupewa shamba na ni jukumu la serikali kupea watu wa Pidukiani shamba. Kwa hivyo pia tungependekeza ama tutapendekeza wakati tumeenda kule Kilifi, ile shamba inunuliwe na serikali ili wale watu wa Pidukiani wapewe vile walifanya kule maeneo ya Mombasa kwa shamba la Waitiki, na serikali kanunua ile shamba na wananchi wakapewa makazi. Na shukuru sana na naunga mkono hiyo taarifa. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Honorable Abbas Sheikh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to support the statement made by Mheshimiwa from Kilifi, Senator Kilifi. Honorable Speaker, as you're aware, I think this country has a lot of problems, especially in terms of lands. You are seeing the other day, houses have been demolished in Westlands, and people are claiming people's properties. People, auctioneers just go anytime. They just get hold of people's property. Farms are taken away over from them, especially the most poor people have been affected mostly, and they're not protected. Mr. Speaker, I think it's the high time this House should come up with and make the visit, see what's happening now in Kilifi area, and protect those poor people that have been, the land has been taken, and where people have been, houses have been demolished. They need to get protection from us. I support the statement.
Senator Okongo.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I also rise in support of the statement that has been brought to the floor by a Senator for Kilifi, Senator Stuart Mazayo. Mr. Speaker, of late, our auctioneers have been very, very roguish. The way eviction orders are being carried out by auctioneers, it's inhuman, and there is no regard to property owned by Kenyans who are in the low cadre of income, which, Mr. Speaker, is extremely unfair, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I used to serve as the chair of Law Society of Kenya, we came up with a board called Auctioneers Licensing Board, and I remember as chair I used to pick 2 representatives to sit in that board. And one of the mandate is to deal with auctioneers who behave in a very roguish manner, like the one I've heard from Senator Mazayo. And Mr. Speaker, you must have deterrence. If you don't take action against some of these auctioneers, they will repeat the same violations again tomorrow. So I really hope that when this matter is considered by this House, one of the things they will consider is to make recommendations that the Auctioneers Licensing Board should consider making recommendations on the revocation of a license for auctioneers who have no regard to respect of human rights and the property of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, when we enacted the new Constitution 2010, we created a special land and environment court. And the thinking
on that chapter of judiciary was that issues like evictions should ordinarily be dealt with by judges of the High Court, not magistrates' court. Though I hear that this particular order, if I heard you correctly, Stuart, Senator Mazayo, this was an order that was issued by a magistrate's court. I think we need to rethink whether there is wisdom in giving magistrates court such expansive powers, including giving eviction, the power to give eviction orders. Because, Mr. Speaker, land is very emotive. Land is a very sensitive matter, Mr. Speaker. When you are evicting 200 families, just imagine how many children, poor children, innocent children, have been rendered homeless. And these are not people who will wake up tomorrow and get alternative homes. It's inhuman, and I think we need to be extremely sympathetic to families that are vulnerable so that we don't render them homeless just by an act of eviction carried out on one morning. So I really hope that the committee that will look into this can also have a hearing from the registrar of the High Court so that we look at the existing jurisdictions on magistrates' court to issue evictions so that this kind of acts should not recur again. I'm very, very sympathetic. I want to say pole to the families of Kilifi, and I want to thank their Senator Mazayo, for really being proactive and for bringing this matter to the floor of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, no wonder Senator Mazayo is now doing his third term. It's because of the concern he has for his people, the way he's in the forefront for fighting for his people of Kilifi, and I think this is commendable. And I plead with the House to stand with Stuart Mazayo, Senator Mazayo, and the people of Kilifi in ensuring that the affected families get justice from this House. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. We will now have Mwinyi Haji Mohamed Faki, Senator.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Mheshimiwa Spika, naunga mkono taarifa ya Mheshimiwa Senator Mazayo kuhusiana na kufurushwa na ubomoaji wa makazi katika maeneo ya Pindukiani Ward katika kata ya Ganda, kaunti ya Kilifi. Mheshimiwa Spika, hili limekuwa donda sugu Mheshimiwa Spika. Hata mimi siku ya Ijumaa wiki iliyokwisha nilipigiwa simu ofisini kwangu mnamo saa 10:30, nikaelezwa kwamba kuna mama mzee mjane alikuwa anafurushwa kutoka kwa nyumba yake katika mtaa wa Ganjoni, constituency ya Mvita, kaunti ya Mombasa. Mheshimiwa Spika, na nilipofika hapo ikawa mambo ni kama anayozungumzia Mheshimiwa Mazayo. Auctioneer madalali amekuja na oda ya kutoka mahakama ndogo, wakati yule mama alikuwa na oda ya kutoka mahakama kuu, na auctioneer yule Mheshimiwa Spika hakuweza kuheshimu amri ambayo imetolewa na mahakama kuu. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, masuala kama haya, licha kwamba sheria sasa imeweza kupanuliwa na kulinda wananchi wanaotaka kufurushwa kama hivyo, kwa sababu huwezi kupata usaidizi wa polisi kwanza mpaka uweze kupeleka oda ile kwa polisi, na polisi badala waje waulize muhusika kama kweli kuna amri ya kufurushwa dhidi yake, polisi wanakwenda mahakamani kuchunguza oda ile, na wakiona kwamba kuna oda kama hiyo wanakuja moja kwa moja kuja kumhamisha mtu yule. Mheshimiwa Spika, swala hili lazima liangaliwe kwa undani zaidi, na hata kama itabidi ile jopo la maauctioneer inafaa kuitwa katika kamati hii ili iweze kuja kuangalia na waeleze ni kwa sababu gani hawawezi kutekeleza amri zile kwa njia ambayo itampa nafasi yule muhusika aweze kufuatilia mambo yote ya kisheria ambayo ataweza kumwezesha yeye asifurushwe na mali kuharibiwa kiolela. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona sehemu nyingi nyumba zimevunjwa. Juzi hapa Nairobi Westlands, nyumba na mali ya karibu milioni 70 imefurushwa, imevunjwa na kuvurugwa Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati kuna watu makao Mheshimiwa Spika ni shida ya kupatikana. Katiba yetu inatoa haki ya mtu kuwa na makao ambao ni salama na ya kufaa, lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, haki ile tukipambana na madalali kama hawa ambao wamekwenda huko pendukiani, ina maana kwamba imekuwa ni kama hewa imekuwa hewa, Mheshimiwa Spika, ama hewa moto, hot air. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, naomba kamati hii itakapochukuza swala hili iwaite wale wahusika wa madalali ama auctioneer waje, ili waweze kujieleza ni kwa sababu gani hatua za kisheria haziwezi kuchukuliwa kwa yule ambaye amehusika na masuala kama hayo. Mheshimiwa Spika, mwisho ningependa kumpongeza Senator Joyce Korir kwa kuchaguliwa kama naibu wa mwenyekiti wa tume ya bunge. Mheshimiwa Spika, nafikiri imekuwa ni ndoto kwake, lakini ametendeka, na sisi tutakuunga mkono katika kazi zako Mheshimiwa Spika, tuhakikishe pia kwamba unatekeleza. Mheshimiwa Spika, mwisho pia ningempa pole ndugu yangu Cherargei. Nimeona katika baadhi ya mitandao inasemekana alitoa kabari hapa mjini Nairobi. Pole Mheshimiwa Cherargei. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Thank you, Senator. We can have Senator Mohamed Abdallah Shakila.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kunipatia nafasi hii na mimi kuunga mkono hoja ya Mheshimiwa Mazayo. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni masikitiko kwamba mambo kama hayo yanazidi kuendelea. Watu maskini wanafurusha kwenye ardhi zao kiholela. Mheshimiwa, kuna sheria ambazo zimewekwa, na tulipopitisha katiba mpya tulitengeneza National Land Commission ambao kwamba inafaa ihakikishe na ithibitishe kwamba mambo kama hayo hayafai kutokea kwa sasa, baada ya hiyo tume ama hiyo commissioner kuwekwa, kwa sababu commissioner hiyo ilikuwa inafaa iangalie historical injustice ya masala ya ardhi, na iangalie kwamba hati miliki zinatolewa kwa njia gani kuanzia chini kuja juu. Lakini utakuta watu wanaenda wanajitolea hati miliki, na wale ambao ni wamiliki halali wa hizo ardhi wanakuja kufukuzwa kwenye ardhi zao kiholela bila thibitisho ya kusema kwamba huyu mwenye hii hati miliki kweli ndiye mwenye hiyo ardhi ama ni yule mkazi wa hiyo ardhi. Mheshimiwa Spika, kuna haja kamili ya watu kupata kujua njia na mbinu za kwenda kutafuta haki zao miliki, kwa sababu utakuta Wakenya wengi hawana uzoefu na ukuelewa ya kwamba mtu anaweza kutumia njia gani ili apate hati miliki kwa ardhi yake ambao pengine ameipata kuanzia mababu na mababu. Na unakuta kwa sababu ya dhulma kama hizo, njia kama hizo za ukosefu kuelewa mbinu za kupata hati miliki, watu wanadhulumiwa. Wengine ambao wana uzoefu na wana mapesa na mabwenyenye wanaenda wanajitolea hati miliki kwa ardhi ambazo si zao kihalali. Mheshimiwa Spika, nikiongezea, sisi kama Lamu pia kuna maproject yanakuja ya LAPSSET na maproject mengine ambayo yatakuja makubwa. Hivi sasa kuna dhulma kubwa ya watu kwamba ardhi zao zimechukuliwa, wakulima na kadhalika, na hawajapewa compensation yoyote, na vile vile hawajapata chochote kusemekana kwamba wamelipwa ama watalipwa. Mpaka sasa hawajijui. Watu hao utakuta watu hawako kwenye mashamba yao karibu miaka 8-10 iliyopita. Mashamba yamechukuliwa na serikali, hati miliki zimetolewa na makampuni, na watu mpaka sasa wameachwa hahe hohe. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa, tunataka kuhimiza ile tume ya National Land Commission iwe itawajibika kuhakikisha yule mwananchi wa chini bado anapata haki yake, kwa sababu hiyo tulipopitisha katiba, hiyo tume ndio ilipopitishwa, na ilikuwa jukumu lake kubwa ni kuondosha historical injustice, lakini wanaonekana wamezembea. Kwa hivyo ile kamati ya ardhi ambayo itakwenda kupambana na Wizara ya Ardhi ihakikishe imepambana na ile tume ya commissioner ya ardhi, iwe itawajibika kuondosha dhuluma kama hizo. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sigei Wakili. Senator is out. We can go to Senator Boy Isa Juma.
Asante sana Madam Speaker kunipa nafasi hii na mimi niweze kuchangia hii statement ambayo imesomwa na Mheshimiwa Mazayo, Senator wa Kilifi. Madam Speaker, kusema la kweli, ardhi ni donda sugu sana katika nchi yetu hii ya Kwale. Na pia katika kaunti yangu ya Kwale mwaka juzi uliopita kulitokea mkasa kama huu mkubwa sana ambapo hata last time wiki iliyopita niliukemea sana hapa bungeni. Madam Speaker, kuna ardhi pale Ukunda karibu eka 1000 ambayo lease ilimalizika. Wakati wa nyuma maafisa wa polisi walikuja pale na watu ambao mabonyenye wengine wakavunja hizo nyumba, karibu nyumba 800-900. Na ukiangalia haki iko wapi hapa? Na leo pia tumemsikia Mheshimiwa Mazayo pia ameleta statement kama hiyo Kilifi. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Speaker, mimi nakemea sana jambo hili katika ardhi. Sana waache hii tabia ya kuvunjia watu majumba, wa kuvunjia watu ambao watu wako na familia zao, wako na watoto, wameishi katika hizo ardhi. Bwenyenye anakuja na ardhi na title deed anasema hiyo ardhi ni yake, amepewa. Madam Speaker, sisi kama maseneta katika bunge hili na wenzangu maseneta tutakana sisi tusimame pamoja soteni tukemikie ili jambo haswa kufukurusha watu katika maardhi. Kwa hivyo Madam Speaker, mimi naunga mkono statement hii na hiyo kamati ambapo mimi ni mmoja wa kamati ya ardhi. Wakati ilipotokea tatizo kama hili kule Kwale, niliwahi kupeleka kamati ya ardhi katika hiyo ardhi hiyo katika hiyo shamba kule Diani. Na pia ikiwa Madam Speaker ukawamuzi wako kwamba hii itapelekwa katika komiti ya ardhi au nyingine ambapo mimi ni mwanachama, sisi ikija katika kamati yetu tutahakikisha Madam Speaker sisi wenyewe tutakwenda paka pale katika ile ardhi tuhakikishe kwamba wananchi wa pale ardhi yao walipokonywa namna gani na tuweze kuona ukweli kwa wapi na wananchi wapate haki yao. Asante sana Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Siengo Kaluda Beth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand to support this statement by Senator Mazayo. Actually, Kenyans have been suffering so much because of land and land issues. And we have witnessed of late so many deaths because people kill each other in struggle to own land. So this is very key that the residents of Kilifi County and another county where people are not really settled because of land issues must be supported. And I feel as a Senate we should lead by example to defend our people and put in place measures that will make sure people own land and they settle, they live peacefully in their own country. I support. Thank you.
Senator Madago Jackson.
Madam Speaker, I rise to support the statement by Senator Mazayo on this matter of demolitions, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the problem we are facing as a nation is the issuance of title deeds and leases, Madam Speaker, without respecting the laid down procedure and rules for issuing leases, Mr. Speaker, particularly on properties the leases have expired. Madam Speaker, county governments need to be involved in the issuance of leases, Madam Speaker. But what has been happening, Madam Speaker, is unscrupulous people, through some unscrupulous officers in the Ministry of Lands, Madam Speaker, have been issuing leases and title deeds, Madam Speaker, for expired leases, for lands that have expired leases, while those lands, Madam Speaker, are in occupation of the owners who have been in those lands, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think as a Senate, we need to protect county governments so that their function and their role in the issuance of leases is respected, Madam Speaker. And if that is done, Madam Speaker, what we are witnessing will not be seen. Madam Speaker, we must also speak to the matter of land administration in this matter and in this country, Madam Speaker. The land administration is a concurrent function between county governments and the national government, Madam Speaker. There is need to synergize and make sure that no level of government overlooks the functions of the other level of government so that we are able to streamline this and bring an end to the shameless demolitions we are witnessing, where people are being rendered homeless when they had a place to call a home. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this statement and hope that this matter will be referred to lands and they will take this matter very, very seriously. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank Thank you. Senator Sige Wakili.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity that you've granted me again to speak to this statement. I first want to acknowledge the fact that land is one of the factors of production. This country, land is one of the major things that people fight for, no matter what, even if it's about ownership or even housing. It is one of the very, very serious issues where people are always fighting about. I want to appreciate the Honorable Senator Mazayo for bringing out this issue. Evictions of persons, whether they are in illegal occupation or otherwise, is also a matter of concern. This matter, Madam Speaker, has been litigated beyond the lower courts, and as we speak right now, Madam Speaker, we have got...
Sorry to interject. I think you could come and speak from here. We can't hear properly what you're saying.
Thank you once again, Madam Speaker. I wanted to support the statement by the Honorable Senator Mazayo on the plight of residents who've been evicted or whose homes have been demolished. Madam Speaker, I want to affirm that land in Kenya is one of the factors of production that people fight for and fight every other time, notwithstanding ownership or whether or not you have got a title to it. Madam Speaker, courts have also ruled to the highest that there is a procedure or a process to be followed whenever one or anybody in occupation of land, whether they have a title or not, they are entitled to be given sufficient notice. They are entitled to be given an opportunity to get an alternative housing or a place of abode. Madam Speaker, in situations like this where auctioneers or the police facilitate evictions without following the right procedure, I would want to urge this House to come into the rescue of such victims and support by ensuring that there is full compliance with the law in any situation where such evictions have been sanctioned. It does not matter, Madam Speaker, the fact that one has already been given notice. If they do not have a place to stay in, the law protects them. It is the responsibility of the government still to provide housing. I believe that is what the Honorable Senator Faki gave in Swahili, and I'm sure I'm repeating in English the exact words that he told this House in his support to the statement. Madam Speaker, I want to applaud the Honorable Senator for coming into the rescue of the people who have got nowhere else to go but to seek the protection of the law, and this House, being a house of order and law, should also come to support of such people. I rise to support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. This statement has been debated, but I'll give 2 minutes to Senator Tabitha Mutinda to comment, and then you proceed on to the next order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One, I want to congratulate my sister for her new position, Senator Joyce. Congratulations. As women in leadership, it's very, very encouraging, so big up my sister. On the matter of these evictions, it is very, very sad for very hardworking Kenyans who've really put all their effort into having a basic need. A home is a basic need. And auctioneers who do not follow the law come in and do what they do, which is very saddening. It is very sad to be evicted from your home, Madam Speaker. This is an issue that should be highly addressed, and we say let the law take its course, Madam Speaker. Let Kenyans respect the effort that, Madam Speaker, investors put. I want also, Madam Speaker, to support the Kenya Kwanza manifesto in regards to the housing project, Madam Speaker. I believe this will be a long-term solution, Madam Speaker, to our country. It being one of the key agendas, Madam Speaker, it's going to give a long-term solution, Madam Speaker. So I say that let the law take its course. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. That's the end of the debate on that statement. Can have the next order.
Order number 8, motion. Effects of upstream activities on the River Tana to the residents of Tana Delta.
This motion came up yesterday and it was due for debate. So we will open it up for debate and I will ask Senator Abdul Haji to contribute.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Before I begin, I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Senator Joyce Korir for her election and wish her all the best in her duties. Madam Speaker, I stand to support the motion that was raised yesterday by Senator Mungatana from Tana River. And I would not like to repeat anything that he has said because I felt that he so passionately prosecuted the matter on the floor of the House. And I felt that he did it in such a good way that it does not really need any repeating. But Madam Speaker, the effects of activities that are undertaken at the upstream level of the Tana River affects many of the people that live downstream. And let us look at the facts of this river, Madam Speaker. The fact is the source of the river is Aberdares. That is a fact. The fact is the river is named after Tana River County and the people of Tana River. That is a fact. The fact is it is the longest river in Kenya, and it meanders all the way down to the Indian Ocean in a small town called Kipini. The fact is, as provided, all international treaties, agreements, protocol, and legal instruments or provision also recognize that river belongs to the people at the downstream. The fact is, the river is already used to produce electricity and to provide water for the people of Nairobi and its environs. And the fact also remains that upstream activities has adverse negative effects to the people of Tana River downstream. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Senator Mungatana told us about the adverse negative effects of the activities that are undertaken at the upstream of the river. The quality of water is affected. We are occasioned to flooding at the downstream. There is extensive bank erosion, changes to riverbeds and banks, and there are effects on the riparian habitats and the animal community. It has also had effects on fishing and tourism at the downstream. Madam Speaker, what we are requesting is that an adequate environmental impact assessment is done so that it can lay out the effects that the activities upstream has on the people of Tana River and Garissa County. The people of Tana River especially depend on the river for their livelihood, for farming, for livestock. And as we from time to time drive by the river, we see that the level of the water over the years has really decreased. Madam Speaker, this reminds me of a story of a gentleman who was relaxing by the river one time, and he heard the noise of somebody drowning. So he hurriedly tried to go and rescue the person. As he was trying to rescue the person, other people nearby joined him, and they managed to take him out of the river. Shortly thereafter, somebody else was drowning, and they went back again to rescue. Shortly thereafter, another person was drowning. So one of the rescuers decided to go upstream. And he was asked by the other people, why are you going that way and the people who are drowning are down here? He said, I have to find out why people are drowning and being brought down here. So he went to the source of the problem, which was upstream the river. And he found out that there was a bridge that was very risky to cross. And that's where the people were falling into the river and ending up downstream and being rescued there. So the issue here is that we understand that the river and the water is important for the development of Kenya's economy. But the activities that are taking place there affects the people downstream, and they end up bearing the cost of it. Madam Speaker, we urge the government to look at all the effects of the river. The people of Tana River are not selfish. They do realize that this water is beneficial to the whole country. But in the process of developing our economy, it is also important to think about the effects that these activities have on the people downstream. And we urge the government that they do a proper environmental impact assessment and make it public, and also involve the communities downstream to participate in giving beneficial experiences of what has been going on with the flow of the river. With those few remarks, I thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity, and I support this motion.
Thank you. Senator Charali K. Samson. You had crossed all the way.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on the motion by my good friend, Senator Danson Mungatana, who is also my senior in the profession. Madam Speaker, under Article 43, it talks about issue of clean access, every right, and I think, Madam Speaker, coming from the backdrop, where says every person has the right to clean and safe water in adequate facilities, in quantities. Madam Speaker, this is one of the key basic rights for every person that lives in the Republic of Kenya, Madam Speaker. The rights like this should be respected, and therefore, Madam Speaker, when the good senator talks about, Madam Speaker, we are just coming from COP27 from Egypt, where our president has committed himself into interventions that will ensure that the effects of climate change do not affect us in a way that is disastrous. And I'm happy that developed nations, Madam Speaker, have taken the cue of putting in place the necessary interventions, especially in commitments that were made during this year in Egypt, Madam Speaker. And therefore, when such issues where company agencies, government agencies do these things that they are doing at the residents of Tana Delta, one of the key ingredients, Madam Speaker, is can they be courteous? The law, the Constitution, Madam Speaker, that we talk about today is the Constitution that talks about public participation. It talks about Article 10 of national values and principles of good governance. One of the key issues is consultation. It is decision-making by involving the people. Any issues that they do on this river, Madam Speaker, should involve the great people of Tana River County and the great people that this river passes through, Madam Speaker. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I think it was not in good faith when you have agencies like Water Resource Authority, Ministry of Water, Sanitation, Madam Speaker, they must involve in even public participation. And Madam Speaker, these agencies should be warned in advance that the moment they don't involve the people of Tana Delta or Tana River County, Madam Speaker, they are risking litigation. And Madam Speaker, there is a famous case of Kiambu and others then that was made in 2013. That is a landmark case that has been decided. I can't give the full citation now. And the reason it formed a yardstick decision by the courts of law in 2013, Madam Speaker, is because the aspect of not ensuring that they take into queue the role and the place of the public in the decision-making of things that affect the people, Madam Speaker. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I think this is a very timely, and you know it affects, Madam Speaker, you are talking about food security. The country, Madam Speaker, is facing the worst drought in the recent times. There is the issue of famine. There is the issue of many challenges. If we allow such issues, Madam Speaker, we are risking the issue of food security, Madam Speaker, as well as access to clean water. We need to call upon the Kenyan to ensure any decision that they want to do around the river, Madam Speaker, and those activities must be well thought out, Madam Speaker. I remember when the government started to construct the famous Muranga, is it the Muranga tunnel that will bring water to Nairobi? And luckily enough, Madam Speaker, being the Secretary General of the dominant party and the ruling party, you also come from that county, Madam Speaker. And you know very well there were many cries that there should be environment impact assessment, Madam Speaker. And what is odd when these agencies just comply so that we don't risk what we are seeing at the moment, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the issue of access to water, these people need water for the animals, they need water for themselves, Madam Speaker. They are violating Article 43, 1D on the access to clean and safe water, Madam Speaker. So it is very important, Madam Speaker, that we agree in all essence that the issue of water should not be. And then, Madam Speaker, the third point is about the floods. Because if these folks during the high season, the highlands, when there is a lot of water, just little water, Madam Speaker, these floods again go ahead and kill people, Madam Speaker. And there is no compensation. There should be a government compensation, Madam Speaker, to anybody being killed by water because of the negligence of the agencies that manage our water, Madam Speaker. Be it WARMA, be it Water Resource Authority, be it any National Irrigation Authority, be it the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, they must put in place mechanisms, Madam Speaker, that ensure there is a compensation, especially when it happens to the floods, Madam Speaker, and it kills people, Madam Speaker, because it is a sad reality. And there is no worse form of death than being killed or being drowned or being swept away of floods, Madam Speaker. And it reminds me, Madam Speaker, in the last session, when I had the privilege of chairing JLAC, you remember the case of Solai Dam, where it swept the whole family, the whole village, Madam Speaker, and it created a lake downstream. And I'm happy Senator Ledama Olekina, the deputy minority whip, was a member of that ad hoc committee that gave radical proposals. But Madam Speaker, up to date, there are people within the DPP who are trying to be mischievous in that case. The people of Solai are yet to receive justice because some people have taken blood money, Madam Speaker, and many families died. It swept the entire place, Madam Speaker. It is no longer productive for agriculture. The Senate committee visited the place. The schools were destroyed. The then county commissioner was transferred. The then chief that of that area was also fired, Madam Speaker. But when it comes to prosecution, Madam Speaker, of individuals that out of their criminal negligence, they allowed the Solai Dam to collapse and sweep the entire village, killing many Kenyans, Madam Speaker. And I'm happy the Deputy Majority Leader, who is the Senator of the great people of Nakuru County, Senator Tabitha Karanja Keroche, is here, must follow up and find out from the DPP. Because the DPP, Madam Speaker, is playing politics with the case of Solai Dam. And I feel bad, Madam Speaker, when people take blood money at the expense of Kenyans who died. And many families that can never recover from the trauma, Madam Speaker. We must, this Warma failed in Solai. We cannot allow them to fail in Tana River, Madam Speaker. We can't. They failed, they betrayed the trust, Madam Speaker. And therefore, when we hear that the case that is supposed to convict people out of criminal negligence, Madam Speaker, is being dragged in court of replay politics, Madam Speaker, we feel sad. Because we buried many people. Those villagers from Solai, and I know Senator Karanja has visited the place, they still cover from shock. When we went there and heard the testimonies, Madam Speaker, they say when the water was coming, and it was 200 million cubic of water that was traveling at a speed that has never been seen. They have never recovered from the trauma and psychological of that issue, Madam Speaker. And therefore, we don't want what happens. You know, many people have not seen what happens when there is floods. It kills people. A classic case is Solai Dam issue, Madam Speaker. And therefore, we are risking with Tana when we allow water to flood, Madam Speaker. You remember there was a case of Rumandinho in state of Minas Gerais in Brazil, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, after that event happened, all the owners of Rumandinho Dam were prosecuted and convicted, and they were forced to compensate. But the people who have been accused in Solai because of negligence are working scot-free. They have their property in London. They are running around. Some of the individuals who are in this Senate, they wanted to object to understanding order number 6 of the Senate standing orders then. But when you go to Brazil, the criminal justice system is efficient. We went, Madam Speaker, in fact, the last time the Brazil closed, the Brazil, Madam Speaker, the Brumadinho Dam closed, is they only finished the rescue things after they have recovered each and everybody that because of the collapse of that Brumadinho Dam. And the state prosecutor ensured that people are behind bars, they have compensated, that company has been blacklisted, they cannot do business anywhere across the world, Madam Speaker. And that is the efficiency. So I wouldn't want to say that we should allow, Madam Speaker, the great people of Tana County to go the same issues. And I empathize and sympathize with the great people of Nakuru County. I hope the committee of JLAC, which I think Senator Faki is still a member, if I'm right, or I can't see any, they should follow up, and I hope the Senator Karanja can follow up for justice.
You have 30 seconds now to wind up.
But I have 5 minutes, Madam Speaker. You can see it's green. I have 5 minutes. Or what happens? I thought when it says green, Madam Speaker, I have 5 minutes. When it says red, it says I finish. And I'm happy the Deputy Minority Leader is in the House. I know tomorrow he's waiting for us to vote for his candidates here and there. But he will need to see some of us in camera so that we can social some of these issues. But as Speaker, but in camera, what does it mean in camera? It is something that is practiced all over the world. Now, therefore, Madam Speaker, quickly, so that I give also that chance, my apologies, Madam Speaker, for the next 3 minutes, is to conduct participation. I think I've called upon that. The second is policy in line with the Nile Treaty of 1959. And then, Madam Speaker, the issue of mitigation, as I have said, if there is anybody culpable, they must be prosecuted, Madam Speaker, and be held accountable. And therefore, Madam Speaker, even this issue of scarcity of water. Water is life, Madam Speaker. What is it had out of CSR? Corporate social responsibility of the Ministry of Water, Senator Sifuna, and Water Resource Authority to only give water to these residents of Tana River, Madam Speaker, where the Tana River passes. It is just, you don't need a rocket science. We don't need even Senate. It is humanity. It is basic tenets of humanity. It is being human, Madam Speaker. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I really feel sad that Senate has to go and beg Ministry of Water and Water Resource Authority, please give water to the people of Tana River. It behooves the people who are in charge of policy, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I hope when this resolution is made, Madam Speaker, we shall be able to move. So I want to urge in conclusion, Madam Speaker, my colleagues from both sides of the aisle to adopt these resolutions. Let us transmit these resolutions, Madam Speaker, and ensure the great people. And I know, Madam Speaker, if we pass these resolutions, it will assist other counties that have similar problem, Madam Speaker, going into the future. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I know there are many colleagues who would want to contribute to it. I wouldn't add much more, but to thank Senator Danson Mungatana, and Madam Speaker, we normally call him, or he's being called Mulamwamba. I think maybe they eat crocodile. The crocodile eater, Madam Speaker. So I hope by the time he can eat this one so that he can take good things to Tana River, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Charalike. I was assuming you would use your 5 minutes in a judicious manner, seeing that this motion has attracted a lot of interest. We have over 9 senators who are interested in contributing. So I request that we be reasonable in the way we expend our time, our 15 minutes. So I want to ask Senator Robert to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to contribute to this motion of the effect, some of the development project that has been done upstream has on downstream communities of River Tana. I was fortunate enough to have been the head of delegation of riparian state meeting on Daua River project, damming project that was proposed by IGAD for the benefit of strategic damming of Daua River. However, what I experienced when riparian states met here in Nairobi is, rigorous, opposition from Somalia and Ethiopia because of what they termed as the impact on downstream communities. And they said it is not clear to them the extent of the impact on downstream community, and as such, that project to date has not been implemented. Madam Speaker, the people of Garissa and Tana River who are downstream, in as far as this Northern Tunnel intake project in Muranga is concerned, and the need is extremely apparent, but it needed to have been undertaken in consideration of the impact it will have on downstream communities with respect to farming, livestock, and the water content of River Tana. Now that the project has been finished and the impact has become extremely apparent to the extent that the Honorable Senator Mungatana has brought this to the attention of the House, I rise to support a post-project environmental impact assessment, environmental and social impact assessment on downstream communities to be undertaken by the relevant authority in order to make sure that the extent to which downstream communities has been affected is mitigated by way of, controlled exploitation of resources of River Tana in terms of the water, in order to take, care of the original, objective of Northern Tunnel Intake Project, as well as consider downstream communities and how it has affected them. As the Senator said, right now the water levels have reduced tremendously. Farming activities along the river in Garissa and in Tana River has been affected. We acknowledge the need for Northern Tunnel intake for purpose of provision of water to Nairobi and Murang'a and other areas. But we equally acknowledge the fact that downstream communities also need to be taken into consideration, their challenges looked into. If this project were to happen and the water is not affected, then it is something that we can always say the project is worthwhile. But post-implementation, impact, because the environmental and social impact assessment has not been probably adequately carried out for purpose of looking at how much has it affected downstream communities, it is extremely important now that a post-project environmental and social impact assessment and actually economic impact of the investment that we have done as a government be done so that Tana River, Garissa are cushioned against the impact by whatever means necessary. I stand to support, and I would like to request that it is considered a resolution of this House that post-project environmental, social, economic impact assessment is done, and whatever measures that need to be taken to cushion downstream communities are done. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Beth Siengo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to contribute to this motion by Senator Danson Mugatana. Allow me, Madam Speaker, to start by this quotation, that any item, object, place, or idea that gives a community identity is very important and kind of should be considered to be sacred. Tana River County is, has an identity from Tana River. So we should consider this to be sacred to the people of Tana River. Madam Speaker, the effects of activities upstream on Tana River have effects on the residents of Tana River. And if we talk of the issues and problems that come with the activities upstream, the residents of Tana River will suffer in the issue of lacking water. Residents of Tana River and Garissa should not be seeing water but not using it for their own benefit. The river carries the water to the Indian Ocean, and those who live along the river banks should be the most beneficiaries of this water, but not to see the water flowing, but not using it, not taking benefits from it. Madam Speaker, when it comes to participation of Tana River residents, allow me to use another quotation or another quote that says, "Nothing for us without us." Tana River residents are not involved, and those who live along the river banks are not involved to decide which activities to take place upstream, not actually to decide what activities are beneficial to them and those have harmful effects on their lives. So public participation is very important. What they think is useful to them, it can be recommended. What has harmful effects on their lives, then should be discouraged. Madam Speaker, allow me to speak in the aspect of women and children. The effects on the lives of women and children along upon the communities living along the riverbanks are so intense. When flooding comes, when it happens, when too much water is released from the Kenyan dams and the activities happening up there, women suffer and children. There are diseases that come with this water, with the flooding, and expectant mothers, lactating mothers, children who are underage, children who cannot protect themselves, they suffer a lot due to diseases that are as a result of floods that comes on the residents, those who live downstream. Madam Speaker, considering the times we are living in, there are effects of climate change. We are aware and we cannot run away from these facts. Residents of Tana River, Garissa counties then will be recipients of serious severe effects of climate change, and when the water that flows along the river that identifies with the county, then this should be taken care of. Residents should be educated. Residents should be involved in knowing how to take care of themselves and how to mitigate about the effects of climate change. Madam Speaker, the activities of residents of Tana River and Garissa County, they do farming, they keep livestock. When the flooding happens, their animals are carried, they die, and then the effects after the floods are so severe that these people starve. There are effects like starvation that happens because of this. Madam Speaker, I happen to come from Mwingi and Mwingi region of Kitui County, and we neighbor Tana River and Garissa. My people go to Tana River, to Garissa to seek for employment, to support their families and to earn their living. When Tana River is suffering, Garissa is suffering, my people from Mwingi in Kitui County also suffer. So I would urge that the companies, the big companies and other activities that happen upstream, the CRC, that social responsibility should be taken seriously. That should be bring benefits to the residents who live and stay on the riverbanks of Tana River. Madam Speaker, I support this motion, and it is important that the government of Kenya ensures that the citizens are protected and taken care of. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Senator Okech Eddie Gishero.
Madam Speaker, I think that I rise to support the motion. Is there an issue behind me, Madam Speaker?
Okech, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the motion by my brother, Senator Mungatana, because I strongly believe that when we talk about issues with our rivers, just like River Tana, it is an issue of human rights. And it's an issue of human rights, Madam Speaker, because across the continent, across the world, when issues of scarcity of resources do emerge, such as water and the management of water, it is an essential issue of historical connection to those waters, as well as natural ownership of the same. In the Kenyan Constitution, under Article 19, sub-Article 3, B, the Constitution encourages us that the rights and fundamental freedoms in the Bill of Rights belong to each individual and are not granted by the state to them. It is natural to them. And under Article 21 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker, we are encouraged by this Constitution that it is the fundamental duty of the state and every state organ to observe, respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights and fundamental freedoms in the Bill of Rights. The orientation of Senator Mungatana's motion that we are discussing today is actually towards seeking cooperation and reducing conflicts in the wake of scarcity. Madam Speaker, we have seen across the continent today that with the issue of climate change, the next biggest war that we are going to fight in this world, bigger than World War, is going to be war on water and scarce resources. And therefore, my brother, Senator Mungatana, today is inviting us to be able to start thinking critically about management of these resources. And this motion, Madam Speaker, recognizes the lack of regional cooperations among stakeholders benefiting from the River Tana. And of course, in extension, it does also recognize the lack of government engagement with this process, and therefore exposes a lot of weaknesses and negligences in the case of misuse of River Tana that results in the negotiations for propriety coming to deadlocks, where, Madam Speaker, you find that things like agricultural practices upstream are not controlled. When people upstream, and I'm very happy that my brother, Senator Abdul, who has just stepped out, talked about the issue of agriculture upstream, right from Aberdares all the way down. When people start using inorganic fertilizer in these rivers without being considerate to the people downstream, when people start using pesticides without considering that there are communities all the way down to Kipini that do depend on this water even for domestic use, Madam Speaker, it is extremely, extremely bad for the people of Tana River who actually draw their name from the River Tana. Madam Speaker, we have had this kind of cases even in the continent. One of the biggest is the issue of the grand dam that Ethiopian government was putting on River Nile. And you know, River Nile does connect, in terms of utility, it does connect Ethiopia, Egypt, and even Sudan. And if you look at the 1929 Water Course Treaty, even the 1959 Water Course Treaties, all of them did recognize that the people downstream, which are the people of Cairo, do have ownership more than the people upstream. The people downstream do have the honor more than the people upstream. To the extent that those treaties did provide for Cairo to have veto powers over projects on the River Nile against the riparian states that did dot the entire areas of Egypt, Sudan, as well as Ethiopia. Therefore, one of the things that I would recommend that even as we think about resolutions that my brother, Senator Danson Mungatana has proposed, I would recommend that our government can be able to carry a comprehensive environmental audit of all existing hydroelectric power dams as required by the EMCA of the year 2000, and the institution and the government should institute proper, adequate, complete, and appropriate compensation for the loss of opportunities in the agricultural space and other livelihoods that the people of Tana River have faced as a result of mismanagement of this river all the way upstream to Kipini. With this, Mr. Speaker, I do support wholeheartedly the motion that has been pushed forward by Senator Danson Mungatana. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Eddie. Senator Tabitha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support motion by Senator Mungatana. And I also want to talk what Senator Fonandi has mentioned about Nakuru County on this issue. I know the Nakuru County is one of the people that have suffered a lot, and they're still fresh as we speak, that we lost people, and up to today, nothing has been done. I followed the issue or what people went through, and I know I followed it through our senator, the previous senator, who is now our governor, Susan Keheka, and I know where she left it, and for me, I'll promise that I'll pick it from there. And I know a lot of people are intimidated. I'll not be intimidated, because we must fight for the justice of our people. This is an issue that needs to be addressed, because even as we speak, our Nakuru County, in Lake Nakuru, the Lake Nakuru, there is that lake that the people living around that lake, every year they are swept. There is no control of the overflow of that lake, and that lake alone, or that national park, collects about over $1 billion shillings yearly. And you know, it's a national resource from Nakuru County, where we know 25% is supposed to be left in Nakuru, and so that the Nakuru people can be able to manage how they can control the lake not to overflow to the people living around the Lake Nakuru. I know there are so many other things that are affecting the people on the ground. Even if you look at the animals in those national parks, how they get out of those national parks, and like the one in like Longonot, a village where I come from, where I know very well that people even don't harvest anything, and it's in the eyes of the government. They know that these animals leave that national resource and go to the poor farmers around that area, and every time these people are almost ready to harvest their crops, it's always destroyed by those animals. And in that national park again, which is like Longonot, they collect again over $1 billion shillings. So I think it's something that we need to push as the senators to ensure that our people live in harmony and our people are well protected wherever they are living, and they have their rights to live where they are. But they cannot live on dangers like the way we know the Sholai Dam did. And that's a man-made project that just was left to kill our people, and up to date they have not been compensated, which I know as a senator of Nakuru County, I will pick it from where Susan left it, our previous senator, so that we can push and ensure our people get the justice that they deserve. So this is a motion that requires a lot of support, and the government should be pushed to ensure that all what people are going through because of the negligence of the government, we should ensure that we arrest that and fight for our people across the country. Thank you.
Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I rise to support this motion by the distinguished senator from Tana River on effects of upstream activities on the river Tana to the residents of Tana Delta. Mr. Speaker, the residents of Nairobi County receive 80% of their water from the Tana River. And in this country, 70% of our hydropower comes from the river Tana. Mr. Speaker, I have noted keenly the issues that the distinguished senator won't address, and it begs a very big question as to whether Kenyan has ever thought of unintended consequences of them releasing the water, because that's what the problem is. Mr. Speaker, I have read keenly the motion, and I would beg that we limit our argument to the effects of the releasing of that water by Kenyan, and think about the unintended consequences. The distinguished senator has said that Kenyan releases water from the 7 Forks dams. The 7 Forks Dam is the same dam that provides us with almost 70% of our electricity, hydropower, in this country. Then it begs the question, why? And what is it that we can do to be able to ensure that we benefit from both the electricity that we are getting from the hydropower, and also the communities downstream do not suffer? Because I did not, and I do not believe, that when Kenyan releases this water, they intended for them to destroy the livelihoods of these communities. But now, as it has been elaborated here and clearly stated, these communities are languishing in poverty. What the distinguished senator did not indicate in his motion is that one of the other big problems is the canal diversion as a result of agricultural activities downstream. Because from the Aberdares, which is the source of the Tana River, going down, there are so many agricultural activities. The canals, water going into Nairobi and water going everywhere. What is it that we can actually be able to do in this country? Because if you compare the activities in Egypt, Mr. Speaker, I went to Egypt. I was in Cairo and went all the way to Alexandria. And you could see that 100% of the population in Egypt lives along the Nile River. It would be excellent if we can all think about this concept of maximizing on the benefits of this water, which ultimately all of it drains into the Indian Ocean, by moving on our entire population to live along that river. One of the biggest problems, and this is why I'm glad that the distinguished senator brought this matter here, is that in this country, land use policy is something which is not really highly thought of. Because nothing stops our population, which is growing, which is another problem that my brother should have alluded to, which is another problem. That is why people are affected downstream, huge populations. So when these huge populations are built, even when Kenya decides to dump the water floods and gets to other people who are not even close to the river. You know, every year when we have heavy floods in this country, we're entertained by news of people running around killing hippopotamus, or the other way around, hippopotamus killing human beings along the Tana River. So here's the thing. I think because this Senate pronounces itself through motions, bills, it is about time that this motion does not just become one of those motions which we pronounce ourselves, but we do not follow through. I think the distinguished senator, and I hope that both sides of the aisle will approve this motion, and they'll support this motion, and they'll pass this motion, so that the distinguished senator from Tana River can now follow through and say, Kenyan, the unintended consequences as follows: people have died. You know, these floods, if you go into the internet right now, Mr. Speaker, and you do a Google search on the Tana River irrigation schemes, you will see a lot of flowery, beautiful language in the website saying that people are doing very well. There is no poverty. Poverty has been reduced. You know, there's over 1,600 acres of land where corn is being grown through agriculture, or maize. There's like almost 2,600 acres and rice. But today we're being told by the senator who has been elected by the people, who understand the geography of that county, that people are suffering. I do not know whether this Tana River irrigation scheme project is just showing the good things that are happening, but it's not telling us really what happens on the ground. So, Mr. Speaker, since we need water in Nairobi County, The people of Kitui, who also benefit from this Tana River but are also affected. The people of Isiolo, the people of Lamu, the people of Kilifi. And today, Mr. Speaker, if you try to juxtapose and look at what happens along the River Nile and what happens in Tana River, then you will not be able to understand why people in Kilifi and Kitui right now suffering from the drought. If this river, which has about 100,000 square kilometers and travels around 1,000 kilometers, you know, why is it not being used effectively? So this is a challenge, Mr. Speaker, to the Ministry of Water and to this government, that if you want to really impact life of Kenyans, let us revisit this issue of land use policy. Let us ask our population whether it is possible for them to reserve most of the land and move closer to the river, and then from then, now think of other unintended consequences like pollution, how we are going to be able to manage these things. We can learn from other countries that have been able to use that resource. I've heard my colleagues talk about the treaties, 1959, the Nile treaties, that is benefiting everybody, Sudan, all the way to Egypt, all the way to, along Ethiopia, from Uganda. I would actually also say part of the source of the Nile River also is the Mao forest. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we need now, when we are pronouncing ourselves, we need to think about how we proceed. I have one problem, because I've seen that my brother here is seeking the following. That it says, now therefore, the Senate urges the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation in conjunction with the Water Resource Authority to conduct stakeholders' participation before undertaking any major upstream activities, including construction of dams, before the release of water during rainy season and limiting flow of water to River Tana during the dry season. I have a problem with that, Mr. Speaker, because before the distinguished senator came to that conclusion, he has already told us the problem is Kenyan, releasing water from the Seven Forks. So the first thing we should do, first of all, is to invite Kenyan here to understand, why do they do that? Have they thought of the unintended consequences? Number two, develop a policy in line with the Nile Treaty of 1959 to guarantee average annual flow of River Tana. The first question before we even talk about developing, although I don't have a big problem with that, is to ask ourselves, what would it take for us to change the land use policy along the river? And I believe there are so many studies, you know, that have been carried out. One of the studies that I came across, Mr. Speaker, is where, and I hope that, and I don't know whether my colleague, Senator Mungatana, spoke about this. When I was growing up, I used to learn a lot about the communities, the Mijikenda, and the importance of the river to their livelihood, their subsistence. I didn't hear my brother talk about the cultural activities which these people who live along the river rely on this river so that they can be able to continue, practicing. I believe the best person to be able to educate us would be him. So if there is any stakeholder engagement which will be taken, the elders who we have now must be invited to tell us how important this river is to them, to their cultural activities. What I like is to come up with mitigation measures to the perennial floods and water scarcity to the residents of Tana Delta. It is literally ununderstandable when you hear that there's a river that flows 1,000 kilometers and then dump all its water or drains into the Indian Ocean, and people have got no water. I think we need to begin realigning our existing resources so that we can prioritize our people. And I think the Ministry of Water
and also this other one called Water Resource Agency or Authority, need to seriously take these matters that we're discussing here and look at the studies which are there that have been carried out on the benefits, on the challenges of this river flow. We should not just be happy here in Nairobi, taking 80% of the water which is consumed here, 80% of it comes from River Tana. The electricity, the hydro, 70% of it. We should not just be happy with that. We should worry about the people in Tana River. I expect the governor of the great county of Tana to start asking serious questions as to why his people are suffering, yet his county is named after that river. It doesn't make any sense, Mr. Speaker. I want to reiterate on one very important thing, that the people of Tana closely depend on this river for their traditional subsistence. And any changes to the flow of this river will greatly affect them. Some of the things that can help us learn, and I hope that when we pass this motion, the distinguished senator can follow up, is for the entire House to invite Kenyan, and this is a matter that we'll take up with the Energy Committee, to invite Kenyan and to find out if they have carried out any studies on the effects of the release of the dam. Let us not think about the issue of CSR. Why CSR? You are the one affecting them. One of the things that I'll agree with my colleague, Senator Cheralgei, is that in this country, sometimes we don't really care. It is all about the Benjamins. It is all about money. Because when we sat here with the former senator of Makwiny, now the governor of Makwiny, and the governor of Nairobi now, in the Solai Dam, we also have the governor of Nakuru now, and we came up with serious resolution on the issue of the Solai Dam, and none of them were adhered to. You ask yourself whether these people have any humanity in them. And the people that I'm referring to are, number one, the DPP, because we gave serious recommendations on what should follow, the judiciary, the criminal justice system in this country, because people died. So if we are going to reduce ourselves into a talk show in this house, then we might as well fold and go. So this motion now should be one that reminds us of the reason why we are elected by people to be here to represent them. I would hope that by the time the distinguished senator of Tana River goes back to Tana, the people of Tana River will tell him, now, following the resolution or the pronouncement by the Senate, we are now benefiting from this river Tana. It is not a curse for us. I hear that the current administration want to sign contracts with independent companies to be able to buy water. Why? When we have billions of shillings. If we can be able to divert this water into private farms, why not look at the budget of the Ministry of Water and spend the money to be able to help these people? So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support and I sincerely thank the distinguished senator from Tana River for bringing this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Abbas Sheikh Mohammed.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to support the motion. Mr. Speaker, as already been said by the Senator of Tana River, We know that water is actually essential and an essential commodity, and actually water is life. As you are aware, Tana River actually meanders through several counties, including Kitui, part of Embu, part of Tana River, and part of Garissa. And most unfortunately, these areas are the places which have water scarcity. Mr. Speaker, according to the international protocols, rivers belong to downstream people. Simply because of the upstream, they have a bit of only the, of the river. But as the river goes far from the mainstream to downstream, it goes to different communities, and by going through their land, they take the ownership. But unfortunately, the people upstream actually have made the people downstream to suffer. At times of when there's enough rain, there's a lot of flood. The Kenyan hydro dams get filled without any notice, without any information, without any management of the water. Water is released to the river. And as a result, the river, actually the same water, causes a lot of sufferings and problems to the people in the downstream. Farms are destroyed, animals are killed, people die, because there's no proper management of this water, that water. When there's drought, people don't get water. Even the people living around those hydro dams, like Musinga and Mbere, all these things, don't get enough water during the drought time. Therefore, Kenyan doesn't care and don't look at the welfare of the people affected by the river. Mr. Speaker, it's a high time now that we must take these people to accountable. They must be held accountable. Even there is no compensation. There is no one time they even help the farmers who lost their farms. They lost all the food. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, that you are also a member of, you came from that area. Tana River used to be the breadbasket of the coast and northern Kenya. We used to get a lot of maize, a lot of food from those irrigation schemes in Bura and Hola. Rice, maize, every food, all the fruits. But today, the people in Tana River themselves are not having enough food because of this mismanagement of the water resources at the upstream farmers, our people. People are diverting the water to go and feed other rivers so that the water can be available to the people in Nairobi and maybe in Kiambu or in the nearby areas. These people upstream are so much advantage because always they have rain. They get a lot of water. But the most unfortunate thing is the same people are diverting the water. Because every time in Mount Kenya it rains, there's a lot of rivers flowing, there's a manyora flowing, there's so many places that have water, but unfortunately the river that meanders to the drylands of northern Kenya and the coast is still diverted. I think this is actually not acceptable. It's against all rules, and therefore we must support the cause of the Honorable Senator, the motion of the Honorable Senator, Honorable Tana, so that at least we can get justice for the people in the downstream, so that at least if there will be any destruction caused by the hydro dams, water released from the hydro dams, then the farmers must be compensated. The people children die, and they get no compensation. They must be compensated. Anything that they destroyed, houses destroyed, it must be compensated. With those few remarks, I beg to support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wambua, Deputy Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will try to be very brief. On prayer number 1 and prayer number 3, the motion by my neighbor, the Senator for Tana River, I support. Mr. Speaker, it has been said, and I reiterate, that Tana River is one of the major rivers that we have in this country. It traces its origins near Aberdares and some parts of Mount Kenya, and flows down all the way to the coast into the Indian Ocean. For the people at the coast, those of us in the lower eastern region, we are communities upstream. For those of us in the lower eastern, the communities residing around Mount Kenya region are communities upstream. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with my brother, the Senator for Tana River, that perhaps the time has come that as legislators, we must push for the enjoyment of rights enshrined in the Constitution. The economic and social rights, as captured in Article 43 of the Constitution, including the right to clean and safe water of sufficient quantities, is a right that perhaps a time has come. As legislators, we must push that every Kenyan, wherever they are living, begin to enjoy these rights. The Speaker, I say this because the burden to ensure that these rights are equally enjoyed today in a sustainable way, that future generations will also enjoy these rights, is a responsibility of government and state actors. The initial move by government, the late 70s, early 80s, the creation of the 7 Forks dams, the idea was noble. It was supposed to achieve win-win outcomes. Control flooding during rain season, but at the same time generate hydroelectric power for this country. The Speaker, as communities upstream, and I said upstream is relative, as communities upstream enjoy the rights to Tana River and the water resource on in that river, it should not jeopardize the ability of counties and communities downstream to enjoy the same resource. The Speaker, I say so because in Kitui County, we have a portion of the river flowing across our county. And what has happened is that there's a small community irrigation scheme called Wikiduki Irrigation Scheme, which draws its water from Tana River. The residents of Wikiduki area and the larger Usweni area have a right to access and enjoy the benefits of that river flowing through their region. And that's what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that these rights must be enjoyed by everyone along the river course. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, on the prayer to come up with mitigation measures to the perennial floods, I am in full support. that there must be a way that this government and state actors, there must be a way out of these perennial floods which are followed by perennial droughts. There must be a way of government striking a healthy balance during the rainy season when we have floods and the dry spells when we experience drought. So, Speaker, if we don't have technology and homegrown solutions to those weather patterns, there are a lot of examples to draw from the region and beyond. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I have a problem with prayer number 2 on the development of a policy in line with the Nile Treaty of 1959. The Speaker, without going into the details, we all know that the Nile Treaty of 1959 is a pre-colonial deal based on the earlier 1929 Anglo-Egyptian Treaty, which advantages two countries, Egypt and Sudan, and the other countries through which the Nile flows are made to just be spectators of the water flowing, and they are not allowed to undertake serious activities along the Nile River. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, if you're going to develop a policy or any treaties on the use of the Nile, on the use of the waters of Tana River, then the stakeholders that my brother, my neighbor, Senator Mugatana is making reference to, let those stakeholders be drawn along the river course from source to where the river empties its waters, so that all communities and all citizens who have access, the riparian counties who have access to this river, then can make a contribution to the development of a policy that ensures that present-day generations enjoy the benefits of the water resource and that they don't jeopardize the ability of future generations to enjoy the same resource. The Speaker, I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jackson Mandango.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion by the distinguished Senator for Tana River on this matter of the activities that affect the downstream, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one government agency that I feel should appear before this House, Mr. Speaker, to explain how the permits were issued for the dams upstream, Mr. Speaker, without considering the effects on the downstream, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, other than the water that is being released when there are rains that cause havoc downstream, Mr. Speaker, should also be noted that during the dry season, that river is hardly flowing, Mr. Speaker, because of the dams that have been established. So the residents of Tana River and the counties which Tana River traverses, Mr. Speaker, are suffering twice. They are suffering when water is released, and they are suffering when the water flow of the river is reduced, because KenGen needs to maintain the necessary levels of water for them to be able to generate electricity. Mr. Speaker, even as we appreciate the role of KenGen in supply of electricity, which we all need as a country for industrialization and for development, there is need for consideration of the downstream communities in terms of their livelihood, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, looking at the situation we have of the food situation now in the country, Mr. Speaker, Tana River is among the counties that is adversely affected, and Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, has a potential for irrigation if the waters would be properly utilized in consultation with the communities that live along that river. Mr. Speaker, WARMA, or the Water Resource Authority, should consider relooking into the environmental impact assessment report that was submitted. And before they relook into it, Mr. Speaker, I believe the Committee for Environment and Water should look at that environmental impact assessment report that approved the construction of those dams in terms of the mitigation of the floods that could occur. Mr. Speaker, we cannot as a House, and I remember the unfortunate case of Solai Dam in Nakuru, Mr. Speaker, which has become a circus, and it's never ending, Mr. Speaker. Despite the fact that we lost lives, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing much today that we can say has been achieved in terms of ensuring the safety of those communities or even compensation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my view, we need WARMA to table the environmental impact assessment report that was used to approve those dams for us to check whether Kenyan, Mr. Speaker, has actually followed the lay-down process of mitigation in case there are floods, and when there is drought, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that they release sufficient water to sustain the river, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that in most parts of this country, where rivers flow to, there is hardly any benefit except for a few commercial entities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the irrigation, the irrigation that is happening using the water from Tana, Mr. Speaker, is only for the well-to-do, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it would be recommended that not only should the stakeholders or the communities that live along the rivers be consulted, but it is also necessary, Mr. Speaker, that also the communities that live in the source of the rivers, Mr. Speaker, be considered so that they are able to benefit. We've seen situations in counties like Murang'a, Mr. Speaker, where water has been drained to come all the way to Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, and the people of Murang'a in some sections where the water is flowing from are not even able to get water for domestic use, leave alone for irrigation. It is therefore important that we balance the interests of the communities that live downstream and the communities that live in the sources of the rivers, Mr. Speaker, because those communities are always called upon to do conservation. And Mr. Speaker, it is time, as a House, we also relook into the issue of natural resources so that host counties can benefit and other counties can benefit from those resources, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion by the Senator for Tana River, and to note, Mr. Speaker, that Tana River is among the counties that in the present day Kenya, 60 years after independence, is among the areas we are still calling marginalized. I think it is time we end the process of marginalization by ensuring resources like the water in the dams that flow through River Tana are given to these communities so that they can improve their economic activities and even be able to commercialize agriculture, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remember there was a project government intended to do in the year 2003 in Galana Gulalu, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, that project was a sugar cane growing project. A project, Mr. Speaker, that was going to have cane for the first time in this country that was going to be ripe in 9 months, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that project had the potential of reducing the cost of sugar by more than 80%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that project had the potential of turning around the economic activities of Tana River, Mr. Speaker, from a dryland to a serious commercial agriculture sector, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is time such projects are revisited for the benefit of the community, and it is time, Mr. Speaker, we amend the law so that institutions like Kenyan and others stop the business of tokenism, Mr. Speaker, in the name of CSR. CSR has been abused by most of the parastatals in this country, Mr. Speaker, by coming around and just putting a small signpost constructing a small toilet there, and then they say they CSR for Tana River. Mr. Speaker, I hope, even as Tana River is suffering from the floods and the effects of the dams upstream, I hope the whole of Tana River County has been supplied with electricity, Mr. Speaker, even as the least contribution for the effects they are suffering from damming River Tana. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sifuna Edwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to join the colleagues who have risen to support this motion by the distinguished senator from Tana River. Mr. Speaker, the argument for dams, at least where I come from, has always been to try and mitigate the effects of flooding downstream. So it is quite a tragedy, as Senator Mandago has put it, that in fact, the people of downstream Tana have to suffer the tragedy of flooding from water that is released from a dam, which we are told most of the times is built in order to stem, downstream flooding. Over on the River Nzoia, for instance, where I come from in Bungoma, there is the argument to dam River Nzoia so that we can limit the effects of flooding downstream, especially in the Lake Victoria Basin. Mr. Speaker, this is a very timely discussion because we are aware that this government has told us that they intend to build 100 more dams. And if the, the experiences of the people of the Tana Delta are anything to go by, then they should provide an eye-opener for the other projects. Mr. Speaker, I have had opportunity to visit Kipini. The senator for Tana River will confirm that there is a very beautiful spot there called Delta Dunes. I don't know if it is still there, Senator Mungatana. One of the most amazing places, Mr. Speaker. And I visited there as a young lawyer who was trying to help the communities with the registration of their community groups. And I was able to see firsthand what the situation is there. Mr. Speaker, also during the campaign, I remember my governor, because the governor of Tana River is from ODM, flying me over a project where they were moving residents from the banks of this same river so that they can be moved to a new site to avoid or to at least get them out of that flooding zone, Mr. Speaker. So this is a matter that cannot be understated, that in fact these mega projects that we come up with must be beneficial to us. I am happy about the senators who are calling to see the environmental impact assessment of when this project was being done, so that as much as we are getting electricity from the dams that are upstream, we must not affect negatively the lives of the people that are downstream. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to assuage the fears of my brother, Senator Wambua, that the way I understand Honorable Mungatana to be requesting for a policy in line with the Nile Treaty is not to have the same colonial imposition of terms on people who are upstream. I followed very closely the debate on Ethiopia building the Grand Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile, and that it almost brought conflict that had the potential to escalate to war. I don't think that is what the people of Tana River are talking about, that there can be an agreement that is reached on the use of the water or the volume of the water of the river without reference to the counties that are upstream. I know Senator Mungatana to be a very accommodative person, and as a lawyer, I don't think that he would want anything to be reached without the participation of all the stakeholders. In fact, the way I understand him, and I'm sorry, I apologize, Senator, I was not here when you moved this motion, is that at least we borrow from the Nile Treaty on having a minimum guaranteed volume of water flowing in the river constantly, Mr. Speaker, so that even during the dry season, the people of downstream Tana can be assured that X amount or volume of water, the volume of water will not fall below a certain line, to guarantee that there will be water for the animals, for the use of human beings, and also for the other projects downstream like irrigation. So this is something that I don't think any of the counties upstream would have a problem with. I know that the speaker is from the county of Garissa. When we visited as well during the campaigns, we were told that even for you, you have been limited in the amount of water that you can abstract from that river, and yet downstream your colleagues are crying that they are being flooded with the same water. So I think a policy that then, takes into account all the needs at every stage of the river to ensure that, yes, the people upstream can be able to derive benefit, the people downstream are not unnecessarily encumbered with flooding and the others, are things that we should all support, Mr. Speaker. So in my view, this is a very good motion. I support it fully. I would want to see this Senate resolve that, in fact, let there be some form of agreement with all the stakeholders, including the power producers, the Kenyans, the other counties, including Garissa, that would want, abstraction of water. It is quite ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. I am sure from your house you can see the river. But in Garissa town itself, there is a problem of flowing water. It just doesn't make any sense. So I would rise to support this motion, that in fact we must come up with a policy when we are constructing such large-scale, irrigation projects, not irrigation, damming projects, and now that we have been promised another 100 by this government, let it be a template, at least for all the other projects, so that we don't have to deal with these matters perennially. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Thank you, Senator Sifuna, and thank you for reading my mind also on this matter. I appreciate Senator Munyihaji.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika, na mimi pia kunipa fursa ya kuchangia mswada ambao umeletwa na Mheshimiwa Tana, Senator wa Tana River. Mheshimiwa Spika, masuala ambayo ameyazungumzia Mheshimiwa Tana ni masuala mazito sana, ikizingatiwa kwamba maji ni uhai na kwamba tumekuwa na maafa ya mara kwa mara kutoka eneo la Tana River, ikiwemo ukame ambao sasa unaendelea pakubwa, na vile vile pia kukiwemo mafuriko ambayo yanatokea mara kwa mara. Mheshimiwa Spika, vile vile Tana River ni sehemu ambayo ina nafasi kubwa ya kuinua uchumi wa kaunti yake na vile vile uchumi wa nchi kwa jumla, kwa sababu ndipo mahali ambapo mto Tana unaingia katika bahari kuu ya Hindi. Mheshimiwa Spika, eneo lile ni zuri sana kwa kufanya kilimo cha samaki, kwa Kiingereza wanaita aquaculture. Lakini kwa sababu maji yameweza kuzuiliwa, sasa hayashuki kwenda Tana River chini, ina maana kwamba nafasi hiyo ya kukuza, kufanya aquaculture, kufanya masuala ya utalii wa bahari na vile vile wa kwenye ziwa, kwenye mto, yote Mheshimiwa Spika yameambulia patupu. Mheshimiwa Spika, mnamo miaka 90 miaka 92 mpaka 97 kulikuwa na mwekezaji mmoja ambaye alikuwa anataka kufanya kilimo cha samaki kama vile kamba na samaki wengine kwa karibu ekari 40,000 katika eneo lile, Mheshimiwa Spika. Lakini kutokana na utepetevu wa serikali na watu kutaka mlungula, ilibidi mradi huo, Mheshimiwa Spika, uweze kuondolewa na makesi yakaingia kotini. Mpaka sasa nafikiri kesi zingine bado hazijaamuliwa kuhusiana na swala hili. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, ni eneo ambalo lina utajiri mkubwa ambao unaweza kutumika kuwatoa wakazi wa Tana River kutokana na janga la njaa na janga la mafuriko ambalo limewakabili miaka nenda miaka rudi. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, maji ambayo yametumika sasa kutokana na huu mradi wa Northern Tunnel Intake Project, maji ambayo yametumiwa kwenda Murang'a, maji yametumiwa kwenda Kiambu na maeneo mengine ya miji na Nairobi, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni maji ambayo yangesaidia pakubwa maeneo ya Turkana na mpaka sehemu za Kitui na Garissa, kwa sababu mto ule unapita sehemu hizi zote. Na ilikuwa ni makosa makubwa Mheshimiwa Spika kwamba watu wa sehemu hizi hawakuhusishwa wakati mradi huu ulipokuwa unapangwa na kutekelezwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, naunga mkono maoni ya Mheshimiwa Roba kwamba kufanywe tena sasa uchunguzi upya kuhusiana na huu mradi, ili huu mradi tuangalie baada ya kutekelezwa umeweza kuleta athari gani kwa mazingira na wananchi kote, kuanzia sehemu ya juu kule ambako maji yanakwenda mpaka sehemu ya chini ambayo ni mtoni ambako maji yale yalikuwa yanafika kusaidia wananchi ambao wako katika sehemu zile. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona kwamba mradi wa Galana Kulalu ambao ungekuwa umesaidia pakubwa masuala haya, mradi wa Bura, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambao pia uko katika kaunti ya Tana River, miradi hii yote imesalia kwa kitendawili na mpaka sasa bado haijaleta miradi hii ile natija ambayo ilitakana kupatikana. Kwa mfano kilimo cha pamba katika eneo la Bura, Mheshimiwa Spika, mpaka sasa hakijastawi. Mheshimiwa Spika, kilimo cha mahindi katika mradi wa Galana Kulalu vile vile mpaka sasa haujastawi, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo hata wale wakulima ambao wako karibu na miradi hii, Mheshimiwa Spika, hawajafaidika na miradi ambayo imepangwa na kutekelezwa na serikali hii. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, nasema huu mswada ambao Mheshimiwa Mungatana ameuleta, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni jambo ambalo lazima tuunge mkono, tukizingatia kwamba masuala ya kupoteza fursa ama kupoteza nafasi za ukulima, masuala ya njaa ambayo yanakabili kaunti ile ya Tana River ni masuala nyeti ambayo yataendelea kukabili kaunti ile kwa muda mrefu utakaokuja bila kuwa na suluhisho lolote. Mheshimiwa Spika, mbali na hiyo ni kuwa kuna mmomonyoko mkubwa wa ardhi katika sehemu za Kipini ambayo ile pia itaharibu mazingira ya samaki kuzalia, kwa sababu Mheshimiwa Spika, samaki wengi huingia ndani kwenye mito ambako wanapata chakula kwa rahisi, wanapata sehemu za kuweza kuzaa, kutaga mayai na kuacha watoto wao kuja kuzaa baadaye wakati mayai yameshaiva kutegua samaki. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hii itaathiri pakubwa mazingira katika sehemu zile. Na tunapozungumzia mazingira, Mheshimiwa Spika, sio mazingira ya miti na binadamu peke yake, hata viumbe vya baharini, Mheshimiwa Spika, itaweza kuathirika, kwa sababu yote hii ndio ile tunaita kwa Kiingereza ecosystem ya eneo hili la Tana, ambayo ikiathirika kwa upande mmoja, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni yote imeweza kuathirika, na hususan inapokosekana maji katika sehemu ile, Mheshimiwa Spika, ina maana kwamba ile sehemu yote imeweza kuathirika, na hivyo basi wananchi wataendelea kupata shida, viumbe vya baharini vitaendelea kupata shida, na vile vile miti na wanyama wa nchi kavu pia wataweza kupata shida. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, ili kupatikane mpango endelevu, yani sustainable development, ina maana kwamba haya masuala ambayo yamezungumziwa katika hii mswada wa Mheshimiwa Mungatana lazima yaangaliwe kwa makini na kwa haraka, Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu tumeona kwamba mambo ya serikali mara nyingi huchelewa, hususan ikiwa lile lengo ambalo lilikuwa linatarajiwa lishapatikana. Kwa mfano, safari hii lengo lilikuwa ni kupeleka maji Murang'a, peleke maji Kiambu na Nairobi. Kwa hivyo kwa vile hawa washapata, basi wale ambao wako Tana River kule chini, wale ambao wako Kitui, sehemu za Kitui, wale ambao wako sehemu za Ijara, wote waweze kusubiri mpaka labda kutakapokuja watu wengine. Mheshimiwa Spika, hii haitaathiri peke yake, kwa sababu tukiangalia sehemu zile nyingine kuna ukanda ambao kuna wale wanaitwa dolphins wanasafiri kutoka bahari kubwa, wanapita katika ukanda ule sehemu fulani ya nchi ya mwaka, na ukanda ule Mheshimiwa wanapita pale kwa sababu kuna chakula fulani ambacho wanaweza kupata katika maeneo ile wakati ule ambao wanapita. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hii tunayoita kwa Kiingereza ecosystem ni kubwa sana kiasi ambacho yale athari ambazo zitapatikana kwa muda mrefu, Mheshimiwa Spika, zitakuwa kubwa na itakuwa tunaweza kusema ni environmental disaster katika maeneo yetu. Kwa hiyo mengi, Mheshimiwa Spika, naomba kuunga mkono. Thank you.
Asante sana Senator. Senator Professor Margaret Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. First, to congratulate our colleague, Senator Danson Mungatana, for such a wonderful motion on the effects of upstream activities on the River Tana. In particular, on the residents of the Tana Delta. Mr. Speaker, I would like to agree. First, I rise to support the motion. Two, I would like to agree with the senator that clean water in the right quantities is a right to every Kenyan, according to Article 43(1)(d) of the Constitution of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, water flows from what we call the upstream to the downstream. And naturally, the river must serve both groups, the source point communities and the receiver communities. Mr. Speaker, this motion is exposing a number of issues. And I really like the requests, the prayers that have been given, that have been made by the Honorable Senator. Because one of the things that are being exposed is the injustice development can cause if it is not taken care of nicely. Mr. Speaker, before a dam is developed under normal circumstances, and I know this was done, feasibility studies are done. This was done for the Fox Dam. All of us know Fox Dam from when we were in primary school, when we were being asked about the number of dams that Kenya has. This was one of the first ones that we got to know in primary or secondary school. Mr. Speaker, that is a long time ago. We know that climate change has come in. It has caused a lot of problems, very high fluctuating rainfalls, and very dry seasons very dry seasons, to the extent that the amount of water that the original feasibility study considered is not the same. The volumes of water that were carried, the amount of water that was being carried by the Tana River is not the same as the amount of water that is, particularly in this season of the climate change. I say this strongly, being a soil scientist, biased soil and water conservation. River Tana. Mr. Speaker, for us to be able to approach the solutions that were being given, it is not only the stakeholder participation that needs to be done, but we need to review the feasibility study that was done those days, those years. There is need for the ministry to reassess and evaluate first the capacity of this dam and whether this dam is still releasing the amount of water that it should be releasing. Because under normal circumstances, the spillway must release the same constant amount of water throughout. So putting a dam across a river does not reduce the amount of water that goes downstream. The spillway is constructed for that purpose. And in fact, at the point of developing a dam, you ensure that you have a way of diverting the same amount of water so that it is the heavy rain that should fill your dam. It is not the water that should be going downstream. You must control the amount of water that goes downstream and only conserve the water that God has given you through rainfall. Dams are a very good control system, Mr. Speaker, as far as flooding is concerned. And under normal circumstances, and this happens in Egypt, you find that there are a series of dams. When fluctuations of rainfall comes, there must be a way of diverting the extra water so that it is diverted in a controlled manner and that it doesn't destroy. So it is very important that the ministry first goes for an assessment and looks at how this dam, what capacity this dam was supposed to carry, and beyond the capacity that was supposed to carry, how much excess has come because of climate change. That way, they should be able to divert the water, and not only divert the water to the downstream communities and cause flooding, but to other storage tanks, other storage dams. Now, what would that do? The ministry then will have excess water that can be utilized for irrigation, whether in the downstream or the upstream. So it is very important that we go into an assessment period, and we urge that as we pass our resolutions in this House, that our resolutions are taken directly to the ministry that's relevant so that they actually start addressing this. A dam is not supposed to cause flooding. A dam is supposed to be a controlled measure in itself. But this is not happening anymore because, as I said, climate change came and interfered completely with whatever the ministry did at the beginning. Mr. Speaker, if that is done, then we go back and relook at the other functions of a dam. A dam must release water for consumption. If we have to take care of the rights of Kenyans along River Tana to consume water, it's so sad that sometimes a huge river like River Tana goes downstream and nobody has water. Everybody is fetching the same water from the river instead of actually enjoying water. I agree that a huge company like Kenyan should have done this as the most obvious thing in their CSR. They should have lifted that water and actually distributed water for free to the neighborhood because they're the ones who are enjoying. Mr. Speaker, I think out of the resolutions that we have here, Kenyan should be made to do the right thing. And I really agree that they should be able to feed the communities around them. And that's why if you have a dam, the same dam can extract water for consumption. And the extraction of water for consumption is not much. And they should provide for it in their own dam so that the water that's being extracted for consumption is the over and above what they require. The danger normally is to release water back to the river with such high speed that it causes flooding downstream. They must control the water that they release, not only for purposes of not flooding, but also for purposes of having continuity of the river. It is only the size of the river that they must maintain. Mr. Speaker, it's therefore my hope that even as they address this issue, because they must address now that it has come to this House, they need to look at the beneficiaries on the upper stream, they look at the beneficiaries midstream and downstream, and extract the water at the right positions. If there is need, we can have more dams than what we have now, so that we have storage for irrigation downstream, and we have storage that can be used to distribute water for the inhabitants of this country. It is so sad, Mr. Speaker, that in this time, in this country, women are still suffering carrying water from these rivers. And let me tell you what I saw when I went to Garissa, your home county, Mr. Speaker. Because I'm an environmentalist, I wanted to drive along the river. So I drove along the river, and I discovered a plant that is called matenge. It was introduced by a scientist called Matenge in Baringo. It was already in Garissa. The plant is scientifically it's called Prosophis juliflora, and I've been involved in some research around that tree before. It is one plant that multiplies itself in the highest speed. There is no other plant like that. And what we discover on River Tana, it has clogged the river. So the water is very clean because it's discovered by this tree, but the women to reach the water, it is such a problem. So it is really something that there is need to have a major plan along River Tana. Maybe we need the Tana Development Authority to look at its own agenda. Because again, we have authorities, we have bodies in this country that may not have reviewed the agendas for a very long time. I want to, Mr. Speaker, I want to also strongly recommend that this authority called the Tana River Authority, the Tana River Water Services, actually work together to ensure that they develop, rehabilitate that river. See what they can do with this Madenge plan? But more than that, ensure that they actually divert the water both for drinking, for livestock, and for irrigation, because that water is a lot. It's enough for any activity right from the upper side of the river to the lower side of the river. It is one gift of a river that we have in this country. Mr. Speaker, I would therefore, I know there could be more members and time is running, I would therefore like to say that I strongly support this, and the resolutions that come out of this, Mr. Speaker, should never be left in the archives. We would like to see them implemented. Mr. Speaker, I thank you and I support.
Thank you, Senator Professor. There are only 3 senators remaining to speak. I would like, because of the time, and we want the mover to reply, if we can just have 3 minutes each for the remaining senators. The next senator is Senator Wahome Wamatangi.
Wamatinga. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The name is Wahome Wamatinga. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also like to support this motion. Having worked in the last 20 years in the water sector, I do have a lot of technical knowledge. And the problem that we have in this country is that when we designed the dams, we had not looked at the dynamics that will change in the future. We had not foreseen a situation where the deforestation will take the dynamics that it has taken. We know that one of the biggest challenges in this country is that all those dams that have been constructed, they do not even retain a third of their capacity they were designed to retain. What we need to do as Kenyans, and I do thank Senator Mugatana for coming up with this very, very, very important motion. What we need to do as Kenyans, what we need to move the Kenyans to do is to look at the impact of environmental pollution, starting with siltation of the dams, upstreams, the number of trees that have been felled in the last 20 years actually is one of the major reasons we have. The drought, when it rains, the soils are already loose, so most of which are washed downstreams, and we find that the dams are not filling from the water but from the mud and the landslide. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think we need to relook at the conceptualization of the dam construction. We start with the mitigating the measures of environmental pollution like siltation, and then after that we can be able to address the effects of water shortage. Mr. Speaker, sir, if I had enough time, I could have explained to one of these houses what we did to the Budalangi dikes. We know that there were perennial floods every couple of years. I was one of the designers of those dikes, and up to today we've been able to mitigate. It can be done upstream where we have dams that are not constructed to irrigate or to generate electricity, but only to retain water, and that water should be released back to the river when we do not have rainfall. That should be the solution that this country is taking. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm happy that the Kenya Kwanza government has committed itself to constructing many dams and using a different approach that is public-private partnership, and I think by so doing, we'll be able to release the resources, and maybe when going forward, the designing of the same should become be based on public participation, and our input, maybe, Mr. Speaker, sir, will help this country get where we need to go. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Next speaker is Senator Tabitha Mutinda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion by Senator Mungatana on the effect of the upstream activities in Tana River. Mr. Speaker, I acknowledge and appreciate the economic activities in Tana River, that is farming and fishing. And Mr. Speaker, these are activities that highly need a source of water. Mr. Speaker, the issue of floods has been a recurrent issue in Tana River. And this has affected the livelihoods of our people. We've lost lives, we've lost livestock also. Tana River people have also lost their food. And it's a very sad issue. And Mr. Speaker, I urge that the Ministry of Irrigation and Sanitation to be able to look into this issue by ensuring that the policies that have been set are adhered to. It is sad, Mr. Speaker, that stakeholders like KenGen would put dams, yes, for their own good, not considering the effects of the people of Tana River. I would urge also with the same policies that should ensure that there's public participation during implementation of these particular dams so that it's a win-win situation, Mr. Speaker. So it is also good that when these policies are being put, they look at the future generation, the effects that the future will have to our people, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, and I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Stuart Mazayo.
Asante Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, kwanza nataka kupeana kongole kwa Senator wa Tana River, ndugu yangu Mungatana, kwa kuleta mswada huu. Bwana Spika, kwamba cha kwanza ni kwamba Tana River kama inavyojulikana, tokea tulipozaliwa sisi tunajua Tana River ni nchi ya Pokomo. Ulikuwa ukisema Tana River inabainika wazi kabisa kwamba ni Wapokomo ndio wanaoketi huko. Lakini kwa sababu ya mchanganyiko sasa tumekubali kwamba Tana River pia imepanuka na vizazi vimekuwa vingi. Bwana Spika, ni kwamba ukiangalia hata ile tunaita mto ule wa River Nile, unaanzia hapa Kenya ama unaanzia katika East Africa kule Lake Victoria, ndio kwenye macho ya ule mto wa River Nile. Lakini ukiangalia hususan ni kwamba hakuna nchi ambayo inatumia ule mto ama kuona faida ya ule mto wa River Nile isipokuwa Egypt. Sisi sote hapa tumefanya benchmarking, tumeenda kule Egypt na tumeona kabisa kwamba kule wanafanya mambo mengi sana na hii River Nile. Tukijiuliza ni kwa sababu gani kama sisi hatuwezi kuvuruta hivi? Ni kwa sababu ya vigezo vya sheria zile za kitaifa. Lakini ikiwa sisi tunaweza kusikiza kitaifa, tunaangalia zile sheria zao ambao ndio sheria zetu, tumeweka katika sheria zetu, ingekuwa muhimu tukiheshimu pia ya kwamba katika nchi yetu ikiwa tuna kiegezo kama kile tuweze kuheshimu. Kama tunaheshimu River Nile, basi tuweze kuheshimu Tana River, ili watu wa chini wanaoishi kule chini ambao ni wakulima na ambao wanaweza kulima ile ardhi yao na wakapata mazao na wakaweza kuuza vitu kama hivyo, waweze kupewa ile nafasi yao kufanya hivyo. Bwana Spika, maji mazuri siku zote tunaona yanakuwa na nguvu yakitoka juu. Bwana Spika, inakuwa ni jambo la kusikitisha kuona ya kwamba hivi leo kule chini kwa Tana River, hata ile town yao ya kwanza kabisa katika Tana River inayoitwa Kipini. Hii hola ilikuja juzi, lakini Tana River inayojulikana haswa zaidi ni Kipini. Ile Kipini hivi sasa hata mimi nilikuwa huko. Ni jambo la kusikitisha kuona kwamba hii Kipini inaweza kupotea anytime, wakati wote kuanzia hivi sasa. Manake imeketi kama kwenye kidengo mwisho kwenye ile cliff, ambapo si jambo la kisawasawa tukiwa tutaweza kuruhusu kitu kama hicho. Kwa hiyo kuna umuhimu serikali yetu iweze kuheshimu katika zile international treaties ambazo pia tumeziassimilate ama tumeziweka katika sheria zetu za hapa, ya kwamba kuona kwamba wale wanaoishi katika sehemu chini za mto pia wapewe heshima yao, na yale maji serikali ifanye vyovyote vile kuona kwamba maji mazuri yameweza kuwafikia wale walio huku chini kabisa. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Asante sana, Senator. I would like to call the mover to reply. We have 8 minutes remaining. If you can utilize 6 so that I have 2 minutes to put the question.
I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to express my gratitude at all the senators who have given immense and very knowledgeable contributions, Mr. Speaker, to this motion. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank
the seconder of this motion, the Honorable Senator Boni Halwale, our very able whip. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the distinguished senators who have made contributions. And Mr. Speaker, I can't thank them enough. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Sifuna, the Honorable Jackson Mandago, the Honorable Senator Wambua, the Honorable Abbas, the Honorable Olekina, the Honorable Tabitha Keroche, the Honorable Eddie Okech, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Beth Siengo, the Honorable Ali Roba, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Gerard Gay, Mr. Speaker, your very self, the Honorable Haji, not forgetting, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Professor Kamar, the Honorable Honorable Senator Faki, the Honorable Wamatinga, the Honorable Mutinda, the Honorable Stewart Mazayo, our leader of minority. Mr. Speaker, this House today has made a choice to stand with the people of Tana River, Mr. Speaker. It has made a choice, Mr. Speaker, to stand with the people who have been over the edges, neglected, forgotten, and in fact, Mr. Speaker, despised by big mega projects that have had no consideration whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, river and water management is not an issue that we can joke with, Mr. Speaker. We have spoken here, and many other speakers have contributed, that people are really waiting to go to war when it comes to fighting for water rights. It's just that we can't do it in this country because we are in the same country. But if we are different territories, people will go to war, Mr. Speaker, because water is life. I remember the contribution by Honorable Eddie, and he said that the next world war would be about water resources, Mr. Speaker. This tells us, Mr. Speaker, that we need planning. It tells us, Mr. Speaker, that we need to start looking ahead. Another contributor, a very serious contribution, was talked about how we need to protect the future generations, Mr. Speaker. This country has never really taken water management seriously. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to carry this. I want to take from what Senator Ledama Olekina has said, that we should not end it here as just an expression of you know, beautiful platitudes that we are talking about. It should not be a talk show. Mr. Speaker, I want to promise this House that we will make proper legislation founded on this motion, Mr. Speaker. I promise this House, and I am a hard-working legislator, Mr. Speaker. I will bring a proper legislation, proper amendments to the necessary legislation that exists so that, Mr. Speaker, we can anchor this motion in what needs to be done for this country. Mr. Speaker, I again say I'm so grateful to all that has been said, and I will take every word. I've been recording everything that has been said by hand. I will also check the Hansard to see if there's anything I've missed out. Mr. Speaker, we will take the expense to hire people who have expertise in river ecology, lake ecology, to draft necessary amendments. This matter is a matter of life and death for us, Mr. Speaker. And we will come back to this House. We will also give notice of this motion, Mr. Speaker, to all necessary government institutions so that they must start doing the mitigation measures that they need to do even before we bring the legislation. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Pursuant to Standing Order 84-2, this matter does not affect counties. Honorable Senators, I put the question that aware that water is a fundamental resource to life, livelihood, food security, and sustainable development, and an economic good, which is critical for the sustainable development of the country. Further aware that the Tana River plays an important role in the lives of communities living along its banks, including Garissa and Tana River counties, whose main economic activities are livestock keeping, farming, and fishing. recognizing that Article 43(1)(d) of the Constitution of Kenya provides that every Kenyan has the right to clean and safe water in adequate quantities, noting that the residents of Tana River County have perennially suffered from acute effects of flooding and inadequate supply of water to its residents and their livestock, cognizant that the challenge of flooding has predominantly been caused by Kenyans' release of huge amounts of water from the Seven Forks dams, which combine with rainwater from the highlands. Further cognizant that the hoarding of water at the Seven Forks dams and other significant upstream activities such as irrigation and small-scale dams limits the amount of water that flows downstream through River Tana, significantly affecting agricultural activities in irrigation schemes such as Bura, Galole, and other small irrigation schemes in the Tana Delta, as a result of inadequate water supply to the canals that channel the water to the irrigation schemes. Concerned that limited water supply to the hinterland and irrigation schemes cause severe hunger to the residents of Tana River, death of livestock, and conflicts between farmers and herders, and that floods cause deaths, displacements, and other challenges like waterborne diseases such as cholera downstream at Tana Delta. Now, therefore, the Senate urges the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, in conjunction with the Water Resource Authority, to 1. Conduct stakeholder participation before undertaking any major upstream activity, including construction of dams, before the release of water during rainy seasons, and limiting flow of water to River Tana during the dry season. 2. Develop a policy in line with the Nile Treaty of 1959 to guarantee average annual flow of the River Tana. And 3. Come up with mitigation measures to the perennial floods and water scarcity to the residents of Tana Delta. I put the question. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Thursday, 17th November 2022 at 9:30 a.m.